At this time, we will have an invocation for those that want to participate, and then followed by the pledge. Lord, as we start this evening, please remember our first responders and the men and women in the armed forces of our country who stand watch over our freedom and liberty. Help us to make wise decisions that are in the best interest of all the citizens of Canby. And finally, after we close our meeting this evening, please help everyone arrive safely at home. In your name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming out on this cold evening. Days are getting a little bit longer, but I don't see that they're getting any warmer. So the first order of business is introduction of our new commissioners. We have 3, which is a lot for our body here. Right here we have Ryan Adams, Jennifer, and down here Jeff Melf. These are all new commissioners, so make them feel warm and welcome, as they will make you feel warm and welcome, hopefully. Then we will have chair and vice chair nominations at this time. So,
I nominate John Savory for chair.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I will nominate Larry Boatwright for vice chair. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We will now move on to citizen input on non-agenda items. What that means is that if anybody would like to speak on any matter that is not on the agenda, now is the time to speak up. Okay? Then we have, now we have the approval of the Planning Commission meetings for December 10th, 2018. I assume everybody's had an opportunity to read those. So since the 3 new commissioners weren't here, just the 4 of us will vote. So
I make a motion, we approve the minutes from the last December 10th meeting.
Second the motion.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Brian, any new business?
There is none.
Okay. I want to wish everybody a happy new year, even though we're 2 weeks into it, but this is our first meeting in 2019. So now we will move on to public hearing, and we will consider a request to develop an approximate 531,148 square foot warehouse and beverage distribution facility with office space at the southwest corner of Southeast 1st Avenue and South Molino Road. The development has been designed to accommodate a phased expansion which could add an additional 224,640,000 square feet to the warehouse. That's DR 18-10/CUP 18-07 Project Shakespeare. Okay, so we'll have a public hearing. So in this public hearing, the applicant will have not more than 15 minutes. Other proponents, people in favor of the application, not more than 5 minutes per person. Opponents opposed to the application, not more than 5 minutes per person. Those people that consider themselves neutral, not more than 5 minutes per person, and then the applicant will have an opportunity for rebuttal. Then at that time, we will close the public hearing. There will be questions, if any, by the Planning Commission. We will discuss it, and then we will render a decision. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please be sure to complete a testimony card. Looks like this, the back of the room, and I have more. Okay. Let's see, where was I? Give the testimony card to the recording secretary, and when the chair calls for proponents, if you favor the application, or opponents, if you are opposed to the application, please come forward, take a seat, speak into the microphone so the viewing public may hear you, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. You may be limited by time for your statement, depending upon how many people wish to testify. And we have quite a few this evening, so there's a little timer there that will keep track of your time. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with previous testimony. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or other land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and interested parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the City Council and the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with a sufficient specificity to allow the local governments to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the hearing body for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. The Planning Commission shall grant such request by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written evidence or testimony. Any such continuance of extension shall be subject to the limitations of the 120-day rule unless the continuance or extension is requested or agreed to by the applicant. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the Planning Commission may, if requested, allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow the parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. Any such continuance or extension of the record requested by an applicant shall result in a corresponding extension of the 120-day time period. And I know there's more to this, Ryan, that I only have one page. So, but what I do know is that I'm supposed to ask the commissioners if they have any conflicts of interest. Okay. Are there any, have you had any ex parte contact? Okay. Is there any member of the audience that has, oh, here we go, right here. Excuse me. Okay. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Okay, so the public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, we're going to have the staff report, and then questions by the hearing body. Then the applicant, again, not more than 15 minutes. Proponents, not more than 5 minutes each. Opponents, not more than 5 minutes each. And those considered neutral, not more than 5 minutes each. And rebuttal by the applicant, not more than 10 minutes. Okay. We have the applicant.
You're going to start with staff, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
This is a new year. I'm sorry. Oh, we were going to skip over Brian, but he caught me, so there you go.
Obviously, I'll take my cue and I'll try to keep it a little shorter than I planned, but
Okay.
there are quite a few things that I do want to mention tonight on this particular request that we have before us, because it is a large development for the city of Canby. This first slide is a reminder to everybody about the applicable review criteria, which are in our land development and planning ordinance. And of course, it includes the zone district that this is in, which is the M1 light industrial zone. And it's part of the Canby industrial overlay zone, which has some additional development standards that would apply that are different than in the underlying M1 zone. I don't believe that they've said anything in their submittal about signs. They will be required to follow up with building permits and meeting our ordinance requirements for any signage that the structure itself will eventually have, and if they're planning any freestanding signs. We do have outdoor lighting standards. They've addressed that within their submittal, and we have access limitations in our chapter based upon driveway spacings for different classifications of streets, and in particular, the industrial overlay talks about an expanded driveway separation requirement in that industrial overlay zone for designated collector and parkway type streets in our park. Then we have the core review, which is our site and design review criteria. It includes a matrix that kind of tries to address in a flexible manner additional quality standards for a development in town. And we also have included conditional use standards and criteria. They have added that to their application beyond the site and design review that are part of the request. And that is pretty much limited towards an industrial overlay standard that says if you're not meeting a minimum 12 employees per acre of the site that you're developing, then it's necessary to bring that to the attention by completing a conditional use aspect or application, which they've done, and provided a narrative why they believe meet the criteria for approval, even though they're not meeting that particular standard. And the review procedures that are necessary for these kind of applications are in 1689. This assessor's map gives us, if my pointer is going to show up or not, this is the intersection of 99E and Sequoia Parkway as it flows into the park. Right here's that intersection by Fred Meyer where Hazeldale Way comes in and goes up to Southeast First Avenue, which is on the edge of the industrial park. And, whoops, now I just slid away. And that's also the city limit boundary as you go kind of east and west towards the property that's, and right here at the corner of the property that's in question is the intersection with Walnut Street, South Walnut. And it keeps moving on me. So this is the property involved, and it includes 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels. So it goes all the way down to here. And that area is 43.17 acres when we add up the individual parcel sizes that the county indicates that they have. I don't know whether they produced a survey that says otherwise, but it's pretty close to that particular size. Then over here on the eastern boundary of the parcel that's in question is Malino Road. And I might point out, I don't know if this is the best map, but there's a little area where these Malino and First Avenue intersect, and a lot, and there actually is a home for sale on that lot right now, that this development does not front on. It doesn't actually have street frontage on that very intersection of the two streets there. This shows you the property in the hatched area, the 4 tax lots that I was talking about. And that's important sometime in our review process, and as if they should receive approval, in that they will be trying to consolidate, re-divide, replat, cause a new survey to be filed, reconfiguring the lot boundaries so that they aren't building the Phase 1 proposal over a property line. So I want you to be aware that they're going to have to do that. They're also trying to reconfigure the tax lots in a manner that will actually have the Clackamas County Emergency Cell Tower that's now on the property, just recently, so that it will have its own tax lot around it. And so that's a reason to be doing that as well. This development is really, the application has been indicated to be by Trammell Crow. And we have engineering firm, VLMK, that's working on that with us to help represent the application as it's, and they're in the audience tonight. And there's a couple of different addresses that are on this property right now. There are a few structures on the property which they've indicated will be removed before they can possibly develop. And as I mentioned before, there's actually 3 street frontages that this property abuts, and 2 of those are actually under county authority and county control, and that's Malino running north-south, and then on the north end, First Avenue is under county authority and control. Walnut Street on the west side is a city street, and of course surrounded completely by the city, except for, you see these 2 white spots on the map here. Those are actually properties that are still outside of the city limits. The blue is representing a light industrial zone. Our heavy industrial zone is this darker blue that you see on the map. This is the site plan that was included in their packet, a large packet of drawings detailing utilities and drainage and existing improvements, a variety of things with their detailed map package that we did post on the website for people that wanted to try to review those type of things. Down here along Walnut Street, you'll see this fenced-in area that is around that emergency cell tower site, and that does affect the developability and how they were working with the site. That, along with the terrain, makes a difference in how they've laid out the site as well, and trying to make it function so they, because it is a distribution center, and they indicated that they like very much to keep the large volume of trucks separated from the employee parking lot that is shown on this north end here. As you can see here, the employer and visitor parking area. And it has currently on this site plan is showing 2 different entrances that would serve the employee parking area, and then they have a separate entrance on southeast First Avenue that is relegated to truck traffic only, coming and going. There has been some discussion in the reports and such about the driveway spacings and such on this, and also the proximity of the truck access with Walnut Street. And that's actually a question that staff will go ahead and raise tonight, maybe for the applicant to respond, is I think they've indicated the difference in the separation from Walnut Street is about 157 feet. The industrial park collector standard talks about 200-foot spacings between driveways. It doesn't really address that same spacing from a street intersection. It would make some logical sense that you would be trying to create that same type of spacing, but it doesn't actually say that. It's just between individual driveways. But our question to the applicant is whether there's actual adequate turning radius to come out of that driveway and line themselves up near this intersection before they proceed through it, not knowing if they're going to turn left and go down Walnut or keep going straight, or maybe someday in the future there may be an extension of Walnut Street that might go over to 99E. In our transportation plan today, it shows an extension of South Malino sometime in the future, indicated with adoption of our TSP in 2010, that we would need for full development of our entire industrial park, that at some point we will need an additional industrial road to provide access to our park. And the primary reason is that the one access that we have today is South Sequoia Parkway, and that intersection will eventually fail at the full development of our industrial park. With this particular development, as in all our commercial, industrial, and most of our large subdivision applications, we did have the applicant create and present a full traffic study related to this development. That was in the packet as well. And they gave a recommendation at the end of it, and we've actually included the recommendations that came from that traffic study as a condition of approval in our staff report. A couple of the findings, and the applicant may address this more. Basically, at this stage, recognizing that the Sequoia Parkway 99E is the only route in and out of the industrial park that we will allow their truck traffics to utilize. So we have I have a couple of additional inputs that we've gotten just today, and one of them is from the Homeowners Association of Tofty Farms, which is on kind of south of our southeast 13th Avenue is where Tofty Farms are, and so it's really a concern about them using potentially southeast 13th as a truck route to get out of the industrial park, knowing the applicant has indicated about half of their distribution trucks will try to head towards the Salem area and the rest of Oregon, and half will try to move to the Portland metropolitan area. And the logic would be that they'll try to go out the 99E and Sequoia intersection, but there's concern among citizens in our town about the quality of life, and so they want to make sure that those trucks don't end up, for whatever reason, heading south out of the park, possibly on Sequoia Parkway, and heading on 13th around up Berg Parkway and out of town onto the highway, going by our schools and the high school, etc. And there is a section of that southeast 13th that is east of Ivy Street that can and will soon be posted only local truck traffic. There's no traffic that is passing through town or originating in town but going outside of town is the type of truck traffic that would not be allowed unless it's a designated truck route, and that section of Southeast 13th is not. Another major street in town that we have a lot of concern about that was actually mentioned in the traffic study was that some trucks might actually try to go out and turn right at the intersection of 99E and Sequoia Parkway, head up to Territorial Road, take a left, and take Territorial Road as a way to get to Interstate 5, which would mean they would come down Hawley to get to the highway and head out, or go to Knightsbridge Road and head out there to get to the interstate. So the study actually said if we feel uncomfortable with that, which I certainly did, that we could add that as a road for them to address all of the trucks that service their business not to utilize Territorial Road. So I've added that in our condition of approval as being inappropriate to utilize any portion of Territorial Road by their distribution trucks that will be serving their facility, with the whole idea of keeping the traffic on 99E. Now, there's lots of citizens that have concern about what this additional truck traffic will do to the highway, but that is a state highway. It's intended to be a regional truck route, and so it, without a doubt, is the most appropriate road. It's the intersections that we have some concern about the level of service, and the one we've been most concerned about is that at Sequoia and 99E. The traffic study clearly indicated, and we have a letter in the record from ODOT, who is the guardian of that level of service on their state highway, a very attentive guardian to the level of service, and they've indicated that they have no concern with all of the truck traffic coming out at that location, and the study did indicate that the level of service, although every time we add more traffic, it gets closer to its minimum allowed, it still meets the standards with this development, and we'll still be able to probably approve a few more industrial uses before we need an additional extension to 99E. And staff is dutifully working on those future extension so that in a 3 to 5 year period, we hope that we can have another more direct route for not only this particular use, but when the rest of the park continues to develop out, when we'll absolutely need that additional road at that time. Trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to point out particularly about this. Might just mention again the phasing that we had right on the agenda. We want to make sure that everyone, including the applicant, that they're actually only asking today for approval of Phase 1. The 755 square feet or 1,000 square feet or so includes Phase 2 as well. The traffic study was done in both phases, so we know the ultimate worst-case scenario. It will be something less than that until the Phase 2 is approved. The applicant said it might be 1, 5, 10, 15 years. They don't know at this time. But it does increase the size, the amount of truck bays, therefore probably amount of truck traffic. But the traffic study that was performed accounted for the entire, both phases. One of the things that is tied to the two phases, however, is there are 2 driveways proposed on Malino Road and 1 driveway proposed on Walnut Street, and all 3 of those driveways are indicated to be gated for emergency use only until Phase 2 is proposed. And so we've actually made a condition of approval indicating that it would be inappropriate to utilize those, not Walnut, but Malino Road, for any truck traffic at all until we have a future Phase 2 review. And at that time, I think I added into that condition as well my concern about this intersection here of Southeast First and Malino Road, that the street intersection there and back just a little ways is not frontage on this development. Therefore, our standard requirement to improve 1/2 of the adjacent street frontage doesn't apply to this actual intersection. So we are getting from this developer some substantial street improvements adjacent that are not there currently in this industrial park. They are proposing a 25-foot of new half-street paving on the full frontage of Malino Road, including street lighting, planter strips, and 6-foot wide sidewalk on both that and Southeast First Avenue. And then to go one step further, since these two streets are county authority, they have indicated in a memorandum that's in the record from the county that they've indicated they will not issue a permit for development along First Avenue until some further traffic analysis is done to determine whether a left turn bay might be needed or not for the amount of traffic that will be on Southeast First Avenue adjacent to the development. Being a collector street, there's a potential that it could be a lane in each direction and a middle turn bay, turn lane within that, if it justifies it. We don't know if it does, and the county doesn't either unless a little more analysis is done. So that's something that's accounted for in the conditions of approval to recognize the county's requirements. The other important thing that were in the county's memorandum, since it's under their control, is they gave some consideration in allowing the driveways onto a collector street when there actually was a more suitable location on Walnut Street because it's a lower classification of street. That's a pretty standard provision in most jurisdictions. When you have more than one street frontage and one's a lower classification, you try to get direct access to the property as much as you can on a lower classification, although it can be allowed on collector streets and often is. But it's something that you want to be looking at and evaluating on the site. We did that at the early stage in the pre-application review of this, and the county, having authority, indicated that they were okay with driveways coming out on the collector street. And the applicant submitted some information, supplemental information that's in the packet, talking about how important their layout is to the success of this development, and that having driveways on Southeast First Avenue is really necessary for their site to function properly. It's a rectangle, it's not a square. They can't just turn things around. It just doesn't work that way, and they provided a lot of reasons in that memorandum explaining that. But one thing the county did indicate in their memorandum, which we've indicated is a condition of approval to meet those, is that they won't allow 3 driveways onto Southeast First Avenue. And they are proposing 3 right now in the drawing that you have before you. So I wanted to make it sure that you realized that if you were to approve this and approve it subject to the conditions of approval, the county says they're not going to issue a permit until they see a revised construction plan drawing that shows only 2 driveways onto Southeast First. My assumption is that they will choose to do away with one of the employee driveways, possibly consider whether that would be relocated in some way with one, and keep the truck driveway that they're proposing, but I'll let them speak for themselves. I know they really want all 3 driveways. They've emphasized that to us throughout the review process and why that's important. The trouble is, I don't think we have the authority to grant that, since the county has the ultimate authority on Southeast First Avenue. I don't really think the Planning Commission can override what they're telling us their limitation's going to be. We had late Friday, and I left the office a bit early, so I didn't review it until first thing this morning. Some concerns from a citizen that we actually emailed their concerns out sometime late this morning to the Planning Commission and actually to the applicant, and then staff tried to take a look at them as well. We've got some of their concerns up here in bullet forms here. I'm not sure I can address every one of them, but I was going to go through a few of them because I think they're very good questions and that we need to try to address them the best we can. And if we hope to keep moving through this tonight, I thought I needed to take a little time to do that. I'll let the commenter and possibly even the applicant enter in on this too if they have time, because I don't know that I can cover everything. But the first question was that maybe our packet of information was missing some pages. We looked at that right away, and there are no missing pages. They thought maybe some signature pages were necessary, but both of the items they mentioned are memorandums, and there is no signature pages or anything associated with them. So we believe all the pages in the documents are there, and there's not missing any. They talk about on the site plan drawing that it mentions point of sale. I'm trying to think what else was of concern, but it was around the fact that up towards the front of the building, the north end, in the middle of the drawing, they talk about point of sale, and that made the commenter think that maybe they're actually proposing retail activity at this location. I'm going to let the applicant address that because I don't know what's happening inside the building 100%. We do have limitations on the amount of retail space. I believe the code says it can't exceed 15% of the area. And I can't imagine that they would have retail space of anywhere close to that, but I'll let the applicant address that. And I think they need to for us to feel comfortable. Then we talked about the street access issues and the driveways. And one of the issues that had come up is that the driveway spacing is met on their side on Southeast First Avenue, but there are existing residential driveways that are on the north side, and they can't actually achieve a 200-foot spacing between their proposed driveways and every one of those residential driveways on the other side as well. And staff has encountered this on almost every industrial development we've done in the Pioneer Industrial Park, where we, by policy now, even though we have standards in our public works design standards that don't mention measuring on the opposite side of the street, the spacing, those in our city code still do indicate that spacing is supposed to be on both sides of the street. So they're not congruous, and we need to change one of those, and we know that. We just haven't gotten around to it. But by policy, we've been not measuring that 200-foot spacing on both sides of the street because almost every development we've done since I've been here for over 9 years has, almost every one of them has been unable to meet that standard if you use existing residential driveways in our industrial park. And the county has recognized that and indicated in their memorandum, since they're in charge of Southeast First Avenue, that they discount those existing residential driveways as being insignificant because of the volume of traffic that come out of them, that they cause very little conflict in turning movements, and that's what you should be concerned about. Driveways should either line up or be adequately separated, but when they're residential driveways compared to the type of volume of traffic that the industrial uses are going to have, they're basically insignificant. And so the county has mentioned that is not likely to be a concern for them, although they are going through a design modification of some sort through their process. But they've indicated that they're willing to approve the driveways on that particular roadway, except not 3 of them, only 2. The traffic, trying to think what that one was about. I think maybe the traffic distribution trips that were in this. This is actually the submittal that we got from Regina Taylor. That's who we're reviewing right here. And I think there was some concern about where all of these truck trips primarily would end up going. And, you know, we're all clear at this point in time that they have two choices. They can leave their site by Southeast First Avenue, and they can head the shortest distance possible, which would take them down to Hazeldale Way on Southeast First, and take a left turn there and go to the stoplight directly across, not the stoplight, the area that we're proposing for a stoplight, the intersection of Sequoia Parkway and Hazeldale. Their traffic study that they did indicated that that's likely what the trucks are going to do, and if they do, the level of service at that intersection will fail with all of the trucks making the turn to go towards the highway. Therefore, not just because of this particular use, but because when the apartment complex went behind Fred Meyer, we did a traffic study on that development, and they said, you know what, you need to erect a stoplight there because eventually development in the industrial park's going to cause that intersection to fail, and we need to add that project to our TSP because it's not identified currently in the TSP. It was actually, in some aspects, an oversight. When the TSP was done, they thought that equal amount of traffic was going to come out of that intersection from Fred Meyer and the one adjacent to Arneson Park behind Fred Meyer. And in reality, nobody uses the drive next to the park. Therefore, they're all coming out the one drive, and that's why they failed to account for a needed stop signal at that location. The city has recognized that need from the time the apartment complex went in, and they have stepped forward since we heard about this project coming forward and said, I think we need to get that project done. It is in the works. This body last year, at the end of last year at a meeting, wanted to draft a letter to the city, to the council, to the city administrator, indicating your support for getting that signal up sooner than later. And there is a contract let for the design of that right now. So it's moving forward, and the funding is secured to make that happen. The traffic study said that this development should contribute towards some money towards the construction of that needed improvement. It indicated 5% was an appropriate amount. It seems pretty low. But we had an independent reviewer review that traffic study, and they actually said, that sounds like it's pretty close, maybe 5.3. But based upon the amount of traffic that's existing and the amount of traffic this will add to that intersection, it's really a fair amount to contribute because it's already a problem for the city today. They're going to exacerbate it and actually make the intersection fail, but they're only contributing about 5% of that additional traffic. So that's what the recommendation is right now in the staff report, that they contribute 5% towards the construction of that light. And so the city's counting on their contribution. Trying to think the next one here that she has, phase 2, there's an assumption or question that they've asked. Is it implied that, and I've already mentioned that the driveways on Malino and one of them on Walnut are only for emergency access with approval of Phase 1? And I believe the answer is yes. And does that also mean that with Phase 2, that they would have full use of them? Well, I think the applicant is probably intending to try to obtain full use of those driveways that they're constructing now but gating off, with the idea that in Phase 2, they think they'll need those driveways. So you might want to keep that in mind and see if they answer that question for us. There was a lot of information in the letter about air quality concerns. I don't want to get into it too much, but it really was related to the fact that the Caris DEQ sampling station, 4 miles south of town, has had a long history. They provided that information in the letter directly from the DEQ site of being the worst sampling site in the state for ozone levels. And DEQ also indicates that Canby's traffic environment contributes very little to that ozone level that they sample, and that it's really mostly weather related, in that we are just in the right topography for Portland air pollution to float down here and settle in our valley and cause the problem. And so our comprehensive plan does talk about that, and that we need to be aware and cautious in developing out our industrial park, because that station and its sampling, if it consistently goes over the permitted level in our national pollution permit system, I mean, it could cause problems for Canby and the metropolitan area in meeting the national pollutant discharge requirements. And so what they pointed out is that they feel like that the truck traffic that is associated with this proposed development could be a real problem for Canby when you're thinking about something that is a known contributor towards pollutants, and I believe ozone in particular, diesel trucks. That was the relationship the letter's trying to make. In some aspect, staff feels that that's an important matter, but it's not one that the city really can effectuate or regulate, even though our comprehensive plan talks about it. It is a state job and responsibility to regulate diesel trucks in the state. And I believe they're required to be permitted. And if they're permitted, they're meeting state standards for emissions. And the DEQ and everyone knows that they're a culprit towards pollution. And they're doing many things today, not only in the Portland area, but across the nation, in trying to regulate diesel trucks and such. We believe that the use itself, the land use, the distribution center, is what our code addresses. And that use is an outright permitted use in the M1 zone, doesn't require us to do any kind of performance standards in our code. It's the trucks that they're really concerned about. It's not emissions from the structure in the building itself, which we have no reason to believe would violate our ordinance standards. It talks about the structure, if we knew it was going to be emitting pollution levels that would exceed DEQ's atmospheric standards, then they would have to be doing our performance standards, which are identified in the M2 zone and is a matrix, and they have to achieve a certain point level. That hasn't been triggered by this particular development because we believe it's what's emitted from the building and not the truck traffic. And I think the applicant indicated to us at the pre-app that they don't really control all of the truck traffics themselves, the drivers and such. They're not their employees. And so I really think that that's DEQ's responsibility, and as long as the truck drivers and they're are permitted by the state, then they're meeting the necessary standards. It's all a balancing act. Yes, it's something that we should be concerned about if we've got a station that's near the top in the state for registering ozone levels. But we also have an industrial park, and if we think Canby is making that contribution to cause that, rather than the air filtering down from Portland, that's would be a big issue. We wouldn't be able to develop out our park, potentially, because buildings emit ozone as well. So anyhow, that's my input on that particular question related to that. Another big question of concern was about wetlands. I think even the applicant indicated our pre-app that they were aware that the National Wetlands Map does show 2 wetlands, not on this property, but 12 to 1,900 feet away on the neighboring property to the north and a neighboring property to the south. On Southeast First, there's a pond off to the highway side of down in the lower area, if you've ever driven out there. They're more a distance away that there's no requirement by our code as long as the development is meeting our drainage standards, which require control of all runoff on site. So it can't just freely run off in the roads and eventually run off into the fields that would get to these wetland areas. The city's ordinances don't allow that to happen. So we don't think that's an issue that we need to worry about impacting the wetlands that are far beyond any buffering requirement that we have in our code, especially since they shouldn't be impacted by our on-site drainage requirements. And that's the next issue, is basically that in the final construction plans, they will have an acceptable drainage solution for the street runoff and anything that's being generated on site, on the private site, has to be detained and disposed of on site. And most people try to attempt, at a minimum, an overflow type underground injection well, which has worked well in Canby. We're kind of unusual in that way. There's only about 3 cities in the state that have the use of underground injection wells that work really well in our particular city. And so I think that's what they're looking towards at this point in time. They've looked at several different stormwater solutions with some utilizing planter strips along parallel in the street right-of-way and such with that kind of thing. But that's technical details Planning Commission doesn't usually get into, as long as you're convinced they're going to meet the Public Works design standards that refer them to the Clean Water Services Manual for solutions that are acceptable for stormwater management for a 25-year storm, and they often address overflow issues for a 100-year storm. She also mentioned our Pioneer Industrial Master Plan, and that it actually indicates suggested areas that would be good for open space within our industrial park. And I believe the closest one that was identified on the plan was just across Walnut Street on the parcel adjacent to this, to the west. But it also made some other suggestions where it might be appropriate to make some open space. And if you look at them closely, you'll find that one of them was where Arneson Park is. So we implemented what the master plan said, and we developed a park where Arneson is. Another was where the logging road trail connects with the south part of Sequoia Parkway. And we now have a new timber park development where we have a brand-new park where the master plan said we should try to have some open space near or adjacent to the industrial park. So that shows we're trying to implement that plan, but it's only policy statements in the comprehensive plan and in the master plan that say, here's what would be ideal in an ideal situation. And we have subsequently adopted a master parks acquisition plan that shows where we are attempting to acquire properties and such. And at this time, that plan is kind of an implementation document for our comprehensive plan, and it doesn't indicate in that acquisition plan that there's likely to be any further open space that we're going to attempt to acquire within the industrial park. So I don't think that's something that, I mean, yes, in an ideal world, it might have been nice, but we have to be realistic. What can the city afford? When are the opportunities there to obtain land? And so you look for those opportunities, and we might still see some other future opportunity in the industrial park, but it's not on this tract of land. And I think that's what they were implying, is that maybe part of this site should be left as open space. And we don't agree with that. We don't believe that a policy statement in the comprehensive plan that isn't represented in our other more implementing documents, such as our land development code or our parks acquisition plan that's more specific, they don't call for us doing that at the current time. I think I'm going to skip the next one. I'm not sure what that was referring to. We talked about the limitations. The traffic study recommended that we limit truck access on Malina Road for now, on Haynes Road that goes up with another connection out in the county to the highway. And if anyone has been up there at that intersection, can you imagine a 18-wheeler or whatever trying to turn left out of that intersection? It would be dangerous. If they turn right, maybe that's possible. But the road itself isn't really improved at this time for heavy truck traffic use. And so they've indicated they'll tell their truck drivers not to use that direction for their trucks. And we've added territorial, as I mentioned. They've also indicated when they get to Sequoia Parkway and 99E that they shouldn't use North Redwood straight across the intersection to go into our neighborhood areas as well. What we need to realize is that there's some trust here in how well they communicate that to all of their truck drivers, enforcement actions, and so that's why the city is wanting to post where only local trucks are allowed and where truck routes are actually allowed, so that we can try to better enforce and have our policemen be able to write tickets in places where trucks aren't supposed to go. The last area that's in the letter was concerning special area of concern J. Those are all outlined in our comprehensive plan. The area of concern J is the adjacent area to the north of Southeast First Avenue, which is out in the county. We had a draft master plan for that 100 acres. I think it was done in about 2005. That plan was rejected by ODOT because it increased the intensity of use beyond what they thought the highway could accommodate, knowing that most of the traffic was going to go back to the Sequoia 99E intersection. So that plan hasn't gotten anywhere until, well, it's been on our mind ever since that plan was rejected, but we haven't been able to solve the problem until we solve the issue of where does the future extension of an additional industrial road to the highway to our industrial park, where will it be located? Once we know where that's located, we can revisit that master plan for that area, or the property owners within that area can come forward if they want to try to annex and produce a master plan before the city can actually finance it ourselves. But we need to know where that truck route is before they'll be able to have any semblance of a good plan for the area. And so that's why we haven't been pursuing that right now until we figure that out. So that's what came in, and just to mention real quick the two letters that came in. One was Bob Cambra. You probably have seen him contribute from our Traffic Safety Commission. And he talks about understanding that the only pathway is through the Sequoia Hazel Dell Way, Fred Meyer intersection, and on out to the highway. And he's right. He thinks that the significant point is the project's 70 trucks through this intersection that will have to need a traffic light. So he thinks making the traffic light a condition of approval is needed. Well, I've already indicated we're already working on that, and this particular development is contributing to that traffic signal if it's approved by the conditions listed. Secondly, he thinks that we should increase our system development charges because he believes that they ought to be contributing 20 to 25% rather than 5% to the signal light. Or increase our system development charges, which really isn't an option for us to do. But it is good for you to realize that right now we haven't said anything about waiving collecting our normal system development charges, which will be a substantial sum that this development will contribute to the city that we can then use for improvements that are needed, like signal lights and larger street improvements and lane widening where they're needed. That's what those system development charges go to. And third, he talks about the project needs to be restricted from using 13th Avenue or Territorial or North Redwood, and we've already mentioned those, and we've listed those as a condition that they don't utilize those streets. I think that's it. And then one other was, I've already mentioned, from the Homeowners Association of Tofty Farms. They would like us to also list, which isn't currently listed, Southeast 13th Avenue as none of their trucks, they should be advised not to try to use Southeast 13th, since from Sequoia Parkway to Ivy is not a truck route. And so it would actually be illegal for them to do that. I think I've addressed most of the issues that I had. There's one more that I haven't mentioned that's important, and I apologize to the applicant because I have not informed them of this. I'm suggesting that you give consideration to one possible additional condition of approval. It has to do with the fact that the shortest route to Highway 99E and Sequoia Parkway, which is the way to the highway, so they can go either direction, out of their site is Southeast First Avenue. From Walnut Street to Hazel Dale is not currently improved to an adequate standard to actually handle the truck traffic that's likely to be using that roadway. They have an alternative. It's about it's less than 1/10 of a mile longer, and that's for them to come out of their driveway and immediately turn left and take Walnut south to Sequoia Parkway, around Dragonberry and hook into Sequoia and go up to the same location and through the Hazeldale intersection and onto the highway. Since it's a little bit further, I'm not sure that they would do that. I think they would go down the unimproved section of Southeast First Avenue. So one consideration might be, at a minimum, for us to consider a proportional contribution towards the future improvement of that section of Southeast First Avenue. But technically, we don't know when the city can actually improve that project and make it happen. And today, you could easily make the conclusion that there isn't adequate infrastructure in place to serve this development if they take the route I think they'll probably try to take, which is the shortest distance, if they're like pedestrians. And that road will deteriorate very, very quickly, and it's not wide enough today in that section. So if we were to propose additional condition of approval that until it is improved, they turn left and go down Walnut Street, which they are improving adjacent to their development, and take that route. Didn't really dawn on me until just recently that that really might be a concern over the long time, because we don't know how soon we're going to be able to improve the rest of that street. And in reality, I don't think we can really ask them to improve that entire distance off-site from their site. I think it would have to be a proportional amount at a minimum that they might be able to contribute towards that to help push it along sooner, that we can make that improvement. So with those, let's see. I think I've mentioned everything else. So staff did conclude that with the one additional condition for your consideration and the conditions that are in the staff report, that this application will meet the requirements of our site and design review and the conditional use permit. Therefore, staff's concluded that with the conditions of approval, that we believe all the conformance review criteria will be met, and that we can recommend approval with those conditions. Are there any questions about the staff report?
Questions? Jeff?
And this is one that the applicant, I'm sure, can answer too, but we've talked about telling the drivers to do all of these things.
All right.
Who is their employer? Who employs the drivers? Do the drivers, are the drivers employees of the applicant, or are they contractors?
So we'll let them answer that question.
Okay, so for later then. And then the other one was, Mr. Director, the prohibition on Southeast 13th. Did I understand that that's included already?
It is
not.
it is not. I think I say something about Township Road east of Sequoia as being off limits to their trucks, but I didn't say anything about 13th Avenue.
So my follow-up question then is, should we add that, or is it reasonable to add that?
I think it's reasonable to add that, and if you think about it, it's highly unlikely they would go that out of the way to try to head to Salem by going down through that residential street. But if traffic is bad enough on other streets or something, maybe, somebody might try to do that. So I think they should be instructed to tell them not to take that road as well.
Thank you.
We don't want them violating our no truck routes. We want them to go on designated truck routes, and that section of 13th is not.
Brian, on the additional condition you were mentioning where they take Walnut to Sequoia Parkway, until which street is it that's not?
The segment of Southeast First Avenue between Walnut and Hazeldale Way.
Okay.
I mean, it does put restrictions on them there, but yet, if they're sending all their trucks on that, our codes are pretty clear in that, things need to be to our service standards where they're traveling, and that road is not.
Answer your question, Larry?
Yeah, but then the other one was, right now, we don't have those truck routes marked, or they're designated, right, but they haven't been,
Yeah, they're on maps and such where our truck routes are, and what they're trying to do now is put signs up where only local trucks are allowed, which means it's not a designated truck route. And so they're defining that. We actually changed our ordinance just recently, and it talks about if you originate your truck in town and it's only going to a place in town, that's a local truck route. That's a local truck delivery, and that's allowed on our collectors and arterial streets, whether it's a truck route or not. But if you're originating outside of town, driving through town somewhere else, you need to only be using truck routes if you're a truck. Or if you originate in town like this use would, but you're going outside of town, they need to use truck routes, not our local streets, because it's not a local delivery.
so how do we make that a condition so that their drivers do understand that,
I think the way we have it set up prohibiting certain streets right now is doing that.
okay.
Plus, the signs will be erected soon, as I understand it, at least on Southeast 13th. That's the one that's of greatest concern right now. And by the way, if you weren't aware, I'm kind of looking at the chair, did you know Territorial Road is a designated truck route?
I did not.
Yeah. And I can explain that to you another time later.
You know my fetish. Any other questions for Brian? I have one, Brian, and it goes back to Ms. Taylor's document. It's under air quality. I think that's fourth page in. And she says that this project will generate 1,568 additional trips, daily trips through Canby. 1,568 additional daily trips through Canby. Is that correct? Does that sound?
I believe it is. I can't keep track of all those numbers right now, so I'd have to double check, but I could look in the staff report or the traffic study, and even applicant could probably confirm that if that's correct, but I think it probably is correct with the employees and the trucks. I think the trucks were 70 or something. I don't remember. And you have to make the distinction between 24 hours or peak hour trips, because it's peak hour trips that we generally regulate on for our level of service, because it's the worst hour of the day that determines whether our intersections and such are failing. And so we usually don't utilize the total trips in a 24-hour period, but that's gives the typical citizen a better idea of how much traffic's actually being generated by the use. So we like to show both.
Well, I was reading in the transportation study by DKS, and I don't know how this figure can be right, but I saw the number 2,035 peak hour
Peak hour.
trips.
No,
So
that would be
can't
right. That's definitely not correct.
Okay. So I wrote that down because I was wondering about that. We'll ask the applicant.
Yeah, and I might be able to find it here when I have time to look, because I just don't have them in my head now. There's too much stuff going on. If you've got one question over here.
Just as an extension to Commissioner Boatwright's question, I'm looking at the TIA Table 4, where it talks about trips and AM peak hour trips, 81 and peak and 89. Those are numbers that 81 and 89 kind of stick. I think they're in the agenda item summary.
Which page is that?
I'm sorry?
Which page is that on?
It's on page 13.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure if I'm looking at the right numbers or not, but they seem to sort of line up.
Yeah, I'll have to check. Chair, I did fail to mention one other item. And it's also in Regina's letter. I did mention that we had an independent traffic review by Lancaster Engineering. They said overall the study and the conclusions looked appropriate and correct. They did indicate, though, in their review that there was some data that they thought was missing and/or information that they thought a traffic study should normally have in it. And I informed the applicant of that, and so we're hoping maybe they can address those so that you feel a little better about the traffic study, since we went to the trouble of having the independent review, and they said, well, it wasn't perfect. And we're not sure that any of our concerns will change anything, but they thought that some of that additional information ought to be cleared up and provided.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions? Thank you, Brian. So who's going to speak for the applicant? If you can step forward, give us your name and address, make sure that the green light is on so you're ready to go.
I think we're going to do all three of us.
All three, so
15 minutes, is that right?
yeah. Name and address for each one of you, please. Starting left to right, I guess, or right to left, doesn't matter.
Yeah. Steve Siebert with Trammell Crow Company,
Speak into the mic, please. Thanks.
1300 Southwest 5th Avenue, Portland, Oregon.
Greg Blefkin, BLMK Engineering and Design, 3933 Southwest Kelly, Portland, Oregon.
Garth Aponitis, DKS Associates, 720 Southwest Washington Street, Suite 500, Portland, Oregon.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. Good evening, Chair Savoy and Commissioners. My name is Steve Sieber. I work in the Portland office of Trammell Crow Company, and we are the applicant for the site design and review submittal for Project Shakespeare. You've also heard from the two gentlemen to my left, Greg Blefkin of VLMK Engineers. He leads our design and planning team, and Garth Aponitis from DKS Associates. He leads our traffic engineering team. The proposal is for the development of approximately 43 acres in the northeast corner of Canby Pioneer Industrial Park, and the use is beverage warehousing and distribution with some office support facilities. The application and the data modeled included full build-out of the 43-acre site, and this includes the initial 531,000 square foot building and the additional building expansion of up to 224,000 feet, and Brian had talked about that earlier. So I wanted to make it clear, Brian did too, our traffic study was based on a full build-out of the site. And just to note, the tenant here will be signing a 15-year lease. That's the intended timeline that they're looking at this site, so under this first expansion. And it just should be noted, anytime a business is making this type of commitment to a new location, they want to know that they can meet future growth needs. It's one of several reasons why this Canby property was selected. and why the design and engineering work, including the traffic study, used the data of the full build-out of the site. So briefly on Portland, on the Portland business unit of Trammell Crow Company, our office has continuously operated in Oregon since 1978, and I've been with the company since 2005. Industrial development is our specialty. We're the most active industrial developer in the Portland metro, and we have wonderful clients that we have serviced here, including Boeing, Nike, Subaru, and Amazon. I wanted to give you an idea of the types of groups we are lucky enough to work with, and the tenant proposed for this site is no different. I would also add that they come back to us for repeat business. We're on our third robotics fulfillment building for Amazon. It happens to be in Spokane. We just finished 2 buildings for them, one in Troutdale and one in Portland. And Subaru, just over the holiday break, has asked us to look at a 3rd development expansion here in the Portland metro. So we have very good clients, and again, this customer is no different. The tenant name will remain undisclosed. However, I'll share some details about their operations, and that will be useful for you to understand their use. As I mentioned earlier, beverage warehousing and distribution. The facility operations are essentially around the clock and 7 days a week. The employee count is now planned for 275 employees. This is more than the 242 that we included in the application. Since early November, the tenant has refined their operational plan for the facility, and they're realizing that they may need more people inside the building. The employees break out into 3 groups, those being about 140 characterized as delivery drivers, 110 warehouse, and 45 office. The office employees are a mix of corporate functions, it's important, and delivery and warehouse support. And I think it's important to point out that the 45 office jobs are great and pay very well, but that the delivery and warehouse jobs are good middle income jobs too. And those types of jobs are sorely needed in our communities. It's a theme you'll see anywhere in the metro area with business development from cities. Last comment on timing is we hope to receive our approvals and permits to begin construction this spring with about a 12-month build. That would mean completing the facility in spring of 2020, and the tenant could begin operations in summer of 2020. Now I'll turn it over to Greg to briefly discuss the design program.
Again, my name is Greg Blefkin with VLMK Engineering and Design. Our office has been in business for over 45 years, and we've been fortunate enough to work with Trammell Crow and other developers on large-scale industrial projects of this nature. The building and the site worked perfectly for the client needs. The building dimensions, the depth of it, provided accommodations for racking and for high cube warehouse space. So bay spacing in the interior has 60-foot speed aisles at the docks. Each side of the building is designed to accommodate a series of docks. We will be installing docks on the east side of the building with the first phase. Future expansion may occur with docks on the west side before any building expansion occurs. Buildings being designed with 36-foot clear height to accommodate high cube warehouse, high racks. Interior of the building will be include a combination of racks and lay-down storage for their product. We will have a cooler with the initial phase of within the building. It'll be approximately 53,000 square foot. That it will be expandable. Building design is kind of an upscale, what I would call a Class A industrial park design. With the tall walls, we pulled down the roof structure at the end walls to keep our wall heights at a uniform level. Parapets will extend 18 inches to 3 feet above the roof deck to hide any mechanical equipment on the roof. Office was laid out in the northeast corner of the building, primarily from an employee entrance and for site security. Employees will enter through the office area and find their way into the warehouse and or the truck courtyard through the office. So the site will be secured. That was a requirement of the tenant, was to make sure that the truck courtyard could be secured. Another requirement was for accommodations for several trucks to queue in front of a secured security post. So the security post is just inside the west corner of the building. We've designed future trailer parking to occur on the west side of the site that would face Walnut Street. Site topography slopes significantly from east to west, about 30 feet. So we'll have retaining walls along Lino and retaining walls along Walnut Street. Stormwater will be retained on site, treated, and then retained on site via dry wells. Street improvements will occur along Walnut Street, all frontages, First Avenue and South Malino. Although First Avenue and Malino are under county jurisdiction, we're actually designing them per the City of Canby collector street standards, which requires another 7 feet of right-of-way. Lighting is all LED lighting. It's all a dark sky compliant, so everything is going to be shielded and directed downward. No uplighting is proposed. Parking area is, again, secured in front. It's not secured, excuse me, it's in front of the office area, but we're trying to keep it apart from the truck entrance, primarily for security reasons. You can see the blue area in between the parking aisles. That is a low-impact stormwater treatment, and I think that about covers it.
And then Garth.
Hi again, Garth Aponitis with DKS Associates. There were several references made previously to the traffic study. I'll give a little bit more. I'll respond to some of those questions later during our response period. But just wanted to, just as far as an overview goes, we conducted a traffic study at the request of the city, took input from both the city, the county, and ODOT as far as what they wanted to see included in there. All three of those groups, including the other consultant on behalf of the city, reviewed that traffic study. Also, as mentioned, the traffic study included the full phase, both expansions, because as a conservative worst case analysis. And I think that's it for now.
All right, and then I'll wrap up our comments here. I have 3 minutes. All right. This is a very large commitment to Canby in both the real estate investment and the trust of the tenant to land its operations here. I think the City of Canby will be proud of both the high-quality nature of the development and the operations of this tenant. And I will share what is maybe not commonly known is that over the last year, the City of Canby has been in a competition for this business, and you won. Last spring, the tenant began its study for this new facility. It considered multiple cities in the metro region. Included in this site selection competition were sites in Portland, Gresham, Sherwood, and Hillsborough. There were several factors for why the tenant chose this site, including the property characteristics, the location, and the perception that Canby is a business-friendly city. I would like to thank the city staff for all their hard work and long hours to review and prepare this staff report. Jamie, thank you for your support along the way. And Brian, to his team, a big thanks. He's worked really hard through the holidays and everything else, and you guys should be thankful for that, as am I. I've also sent to Brian earlier today, and I have a hard copy here of a list of 37 businesses and individuals that are in favor of this development. In the interest of time, I don't believe that they're going to testify, but we welcome their support. I also have a copy of that list. Okay, in closing, we were pleased to see the city staff recommendation for approval of our application, and we look forward to the public testimony and your questions and comments. Thank you very much, Commissioner Savoy.
Savory. There's a lot in there. That's good. I get it lots of different ways. So try his. Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I have a question for the traffic guy. What are the peak hour trips, the numbers?
Yeah, so as the reference was made to that table earlier in the report, so again, this is with full phase, not just the initial 500,000, but the additional phases. During the morning peak, it's about 80 trips. In the evening peak, it's about 90 trips.
So the 80 trips are coming and going, or?
That's total trips, coming, going, cars, trucks, everything combined.
Oh, okay.
Total driveway trips going in and out.
Oh, okay. How many of those are trucks? Do you know?
In the morning period, it's about half of them. In the evening period, I think it's about a third or a quarter of them.
I think it's at 27%, I think is what I saw.
Yeah, about a quarter of them.
In the evening?
In the evening, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Question. Can you specify which peak hour in the morning and evening that is?
Yeah, so that would be kind of your typical commuter peak during the morning and the evening, and so it's when businesses are getting ready to start, people are on their way to their jobs, school's starting, that kind of thing. So in the morning period, we looked at the full 2-hour period from 7 to 9 a.m. and then took the worst of that. For most intersections, that occurs from about 7:30 to 8:30. There's a little bit of leeway depending on where you are. In the evening period, we also looked at a 2-hour period of 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. The actual occurrence of the peak hour in the evening is about, I think, 4:15 to 5:15. It's a little bit earlier than some areas.
Thank you.
So now this operation, it's going to be 24/7, right? So you'll be drivers will be coming in the morning. I have a business down in Portland, so we receive product starting about 5 o'clock in the morning. Is that going to be drivers coming in? That's one of our peak hours.
Sure.
4:30 to 5 o'clock. So.
Deliveries come in almost at all hours. They come from over-the-road trucking operations, from beverage manufacturing operations, essentially, right? And they come into this facility, they're stored here, and then they're distributed. All the outbound trips, those drivers are all, that's that 140 employees that I mentioned earlier, those are all employees of this tenant. And, one of the questions was about the trust, I think, that Brian mentioned for the drivers taking the right routes. Well, the 140 employees for this tenant have a handbook and a monthly training session for what they can and cannot do. They're professional drivers, and if they don't follow those rules, they don't have a job with this company. So that's pretty straightforward. Does that answer your question? Well, and then I guess I could say, so most of these outbound trips through the evening, just to kind of describe a little bit about how this works, warehouse employees come in throughout the day and they prepare the shipments overnight. That's why it's a 24-hour operation. They're working inside the building, preparing the shipments, loading the trucks, and then most of those trucks have left by 6 or 7. I think the peak distribution window is somewhere between 3 and 6, I think, something like that. or maybe it was 5 and 6, but it's essentially before most people are up and doing things, most of those, and if you can imagine, they're delivery drivers, so those deliveries need to go to Albertsons and Plaid Pantry and wherever else they need to go, and we see them when we're getting our coffee in the morning. Those guys and girls are in delivering those goods to the various retailers. So does that help with that question?
Any other questions?
Could you give them just 1 minute to review their elevations that you brought? I mean, I can...
The rendering, could you,
Yeah,
sure, please?
Would you like to show those?
I'm going to jump in here first and just say that this building, the way it's designed and how we've instructed Greg, we've taken some examples from Silicon Valley, frankly, that have some exterior features and concrete tilts that are not always common in the Portland area. And they're a little nuanced in this, but there's some, what would you call those, reveals and some other things that are on the exterior of the building.
Form liners.
Yeah, that help give it a little more, a nicer finish. And frankly, the type of development that we do is 100% Class A. Our investors expect this of us. This is what we do. And you'll see that with any of the other developments that we've done. Greg had mentioned the parapet heights are higher. It's a nicer finish. It costs more money, but it does create a better view. In the right-hand corner, that is a couple of renderings of the office. It's 16,000 feet of office. If that was an office building on your main street, it would be a busy, nice office building, frankly. That's exactly what this is here. You can see a break room. There's a kind of a soft seating area, more break room, and some workspace. The bottom right-hand corner is actually where the drivers interface for their trips each morning. And when they return. And I don't know, Greg, you want to add anything else?
I didn't speak too much to the landscaping. The landscaping that we have around the perimeter of the building and the perimeter of the yard will screen the yard. So the secured yard will have a cyclone fence around a black PVC coated cyclone fence with slats, and that will be accompanied with a pretty extensive landscape screening around the perimeter. With Milano Road being 15 feet above finished floor, there's going to be a six-foot retaining wall along Milano Road that kind of slopes down towards the site. So we're screening that setback. At the office entry, you'll see some stepped panels, some elevations that step up and protrude away from the building. The glass area is pretty expansive along the storefront, and it shows up in the images of the interior. So we're trying to invite quite a bit of light into the building, into the office area. And the office design is an open space that allows for flex work areas and workspaces. There's a couple covered areas. There's a side load canopy that's in the back of the office. We're actually using the office to screen that from the parking area. But that offload canopy is where trucks will back in and will be offloaded from the side of the trucks. They won't be under the dock.
From the drawings, it looks like one of the points that was brought up is whether or not there's going to be retail from the drawings. It doesn't look like that is happening.
Yeah, that's correct. There's no retail in the building. So point of sale is a name for the merchandise that can go with beverages. If you walk into an Albertsons and there's a certain type of beverage up front that's in cardboard stands and things like that with some signage, that's a point of sale. And then there's a will call, and that's for these customers at times if they either have explain this without,
Like a dock sales type of thing?
it's not even really dock sales. It's if something was either missed in a delivery or they need more of something, they can come here without waiting until the next morning delivery. They can show up to a will call, take delivery of something that they need, if it's for a restaurant in the evening, or, you know, if it's the state fair, I guess, you know, and they need something there. So that's what the will call. So, yeah, that's a good point of clarification. There was kind of one last thing, just as Brian ticked off the questions from Ms. Taylor. I think all but now one have been answered. I had two that were remaining. One was the retail one, you just asked that question, and the last one was the expansion. And in the scenarios where this tenant in this building, either during that 15-year lease period or after it would expand, they would not need the driveways on Malino or Walnut Street. And if you can picture this, the way the circulation of product and people move at this building, whether it's Amazon, Subaru's done it, this is very common in large bulk distribution buildings. They come in and they want to circulate counterclockwise around the building, and they want to check in and out through one place. Now, Amazon during peak uses two, but most, like Subaru that we've done and others, so they'll come in through the guard shack, they check in off of First, they drive counterclockwise around the building, they hit their docks, they get deliveries, whatever, and they come back out same way. If the building's expanded, the same flow of traffic happens, it just that building gets bigger by 100 or 200,000 feet, and that loop road just goes further south, and they come down and they come back out. So in the proposal here, those driveways on Malino and Walnut are really only for emergency access and some kind of special use.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Ron? Okay. Any other questions?
I have one. On the types of trucks, are they all 18-wheelers coming through? Are they sprinters? What is it, combination?
There's a wide variety of trucks. And I don't know, Garth, if you want to add to it more than that. And I think it does vary. There are 18-wheelers, there's no doubt, but there are what we would call box or city trucks, and then there's even smaller ones than that based on some of the other product that they have that they deliver, which would be more like a Sprinter. So it's a wide variety of trucks.
I had one other question. Brian had brought up a concern about having enough distance between the truck driveway and the nearby intersection, of it being less than 200 feet. Is there going to be any problem with trucks making that turn?
You want to answer that, or?
Yeah, go ahead, Sam. Go ahead.
And I think Brian was talking about a couple different cases. One would be if they were to turn down and head south on Walnut Street. And so that's something that he had also brought up that could be related to a potential condition of approval if they were required to go that route rather than using First. The secondary access, which is probably more likely in the future, depending on where that connection to the highway occurs. If that connection, the future connection to the highway were to extend and intersect with Walnut, then trucks and other vehicles would need to be able to come in and out of Walnut, and then from the highway, and then get down to the site. So the trucks, I mean, once as they go through the layout of the driveways, I mean, you'd check for the truck turning radii and everything. You know, where the driveways are at right now, they might need to shift just a touch, but as far as the general layout and the plans, they would address that so that they could make those maneuvers either to the north or to the south.
Okay, thank you.
So if we put that condition in that you go Walnut to Sequoia and then out to 99E, is that going to give you a problem with your truck turning radius and stuff?
It'd be something we need to check. I mean, you'd want to be sure that it's addressed if that's the movement that's planned to be used.
Because we were thinking of adding that to your conditions to keep you off of First Street and Walnut, or no, First Street and Hazeldale until it is improved.
Right. So, as Brian mentioned, this is the first we've heard of that potential condition. We need to study it, frankly. I mean, we'll leave it up to you for your decision tonight, but it's not something we can answer right now.
I might add to that, there was a question about a design review modification or a road modification, and in the Clackamas County standards, the road modification is for taking access from the collector and not the lower classified street Walnut. So the county's asking us to go through the formalities of a road modification. They didn't have any concerns with the design exception or the driveway spacing standards, but we will likely approach them with expanding that road modification to explore opportunities for maybe a right-in, right-out drive in lieu of eliminating or reducing our drives to 3 drives off of First Avenue. With a right-in, right-out drive, we hope that would address any concerns that they may have.
I might add that staff did not have a problem with the 3 driveways proposed and their spacing. The county had the problem.
Okay. Any more questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me see. Our first contestant will be Kathy Pauley. If you could state your name and address, please.
My name is Kathy Pauley. I live at 12678 South New Era Road in Oregon City. And I grew up at Hazeldale Gardens, which is by the pond you were talking about on the Canby end of First Avenue. I prepared a nice long speech about that I timed for 3 minutes exactly, and most of that has been already covered. I am in favor of this particular project. It's taken me a while to get used to the idea of the park to begin with, because I grew up on farmland. And what I wanted to relay that wasn't really covered in that is that, in my speech, is that I fully believe that I'm not the only one. I think most of the people that are concerned about the traffic. And ever since Canby's Industrial Park was first planned 30 years ago, traffic has been the biggest issue. And I'm not just talking about traffic from Project Shakespeare. We have heard from the city over and over again about, well, eventually we'll do this, or eventually we'll do that. And that's great, but the state of Oregon, Clackamas County, and the city of Canby all tend to have a, well, let's wait and see, and actually not do anything until it's not, here's this project and we want to, we project there's going to be traffic, and then they say, well, when the traffic gets here, then we'll deal with it. But the problem is, it doesn't work very well that way. When they put in Ackerman Middle School and put in the traffic light there, they would not put in that light till they sat there and counted the cars. And so I'm just cautioning this city that the citizens are not upset with the project. Most of us are concerned about the traffic. And I know that I have heard behind me as I was listening tonight, quite a few people that were concerned about semi-trucks. My husband and I owned dump trucks with long neck pups. And I would just, for the commission and for the folks behind me, mention that there are major improvements that have been done with trucks over the years and also with inspections. And they've even gone so far as to have now mobile inspection stations, and one of their favorite places to sit is out on the flat coming into Canby over by what's now called the double lot. It used to be the spinning wheel. They sit there quite regularly and do their inspections. As far as traffic, you folks have talked about it all coming out Sequoia Parkway. And the people behind me were talking about, oh, well, they're probably going to do this other instead. There is a big deal about a semi trying to get onto 99E. And if it's a semi truck, they're going to take 2 lanes to get on, no matter which direction you turn. You can't do that safely without a traffic light. That's why everything is projected towards Sequoia Parkway, is because that's where the traffic light currently is. So.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Pauley? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next we'd like to hear from Tamara Driver. It says here you're neutral, so.
My name is Tamara Driver. I live at 22992 South Haynes Road. So according to everything we've listened to tonight, I'm not supposed to be affected traffic-wise because I live on Haynes. I just still have a concern with having 3 children and their bus stop out there that maybe someone doesn't get the memo that go to Sequoia and around. If you're going north on 99, don't come through and go to Territorial or New Era where that light is. And the other concern I have is just First. I drive down the center of First as it is now because it's such a poorly maintained road, and I know that's not something you can do anything about, being that it's a county road, but I'm just really concerned that that's my route and a lot of people's route from outlying areas into town. So I did like what the director said about if there's any way to use Walnut until First can be all the way improved. That's my input. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Have you contacted the county with your concerns?
I have not, because up until tonight, I still wasn't quite sure who was responsible for what road, whether it's the city. I always thought that First was included in the city, and I learned tonight that it's only the county.
They don't care.
Oh.
Just to let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I have Nicole Plop.
Hi, my name is Nicole Plop, and I live at 2344 Southeast First Avenue. Initially I was like, oh my gosh, I live out in the country. My grandparents have owned this house since the 50s. I was going to retire here. I totally knew that there was an industrial area, across the street. I have to walk across Southeast First to go to my mailbox. But you know what? The more that I think about it and I see the plans and everything and how hard these guys are trying, again, like Kathy said, I don't think that most of the people are opposed to the building. I think it has to do with the traffic. So I was out in my yard today because the weather was so beautiful, and there on Sequoia, there's a new construction area. Dump truck after dump truck after dump truck going up Southeast First. I think they're going delivering dirt to someone, but just dump truck after dump truck, and I'm like, okay, how in the world is this road going to handle more trucks? Like Tamara said, there's not even yellow lines on this road. This is a county road with potholes, and it's not wide. As a matter of fact, part of my property has an embankment, and the other side has an embankment. So I don't know how it's going to be possible when the trucks come out of the driveway and they hang a left. Yeah, everything to the right is going to be improved and beautiful. So basically from Walnut to Malino, it's going to be improved, and it's going to be beautiful, and sidewalks and everything. But I would be curious about from Walnut to Hazeldale, how in the world that's going to handle trucks and traffic like that. So until that's improved, my vote would be to go out Walnut to Sequoia. Because if I'm not mistaken, and I can't quote exactly where I heard this, but when the industrial area was initially talked about way back when, many years ago, when my grandparents were around, it said in paperwork after paperwork, that Southeast First, they were going to specifically try to keep business traffic off of Southeast First. So I'm not sure why that's changed now, especially when going from Walnut towards Sequoia has been improved. So you just jump on Walnut, go to Sequoia, zip out to the traffic light, and you're there. I think that's what it was designed for in the first place. Southeast First was not. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Mr. Roger Scoe. Scoey. Sorry.
Yeah. My name is Roger Scoe. I live at 1853 North Teakwood Circle, Canby, Oregon. And my primary interest in matter is to minimize industrial area traffic on Southeast First and South Haines Road to help maintain neighborhood traffic safety, neighborhood livability, and property values. I had hoped initially that by including some conditions for the approval that would be able to address some of these concerns, and I submitted a packet or comments that were in the packet, and I had hoped that they could take access off of Walnut, and found out that's not feasible. So I guess at that point I kind of changed my mind from being neutral to being opposed to it, because it doesn't seem to me that it can take place without having a negative impact on the residents. There's a criteria that I think the Planning Commission needs to find that there's not more than minimal negative impact to surrounding properties. And I guess I don't feel like that condition has been met or will be met if you've got operations going 24 hours a day. And I guess one way that I thought people might attempt to evaluate that is how you would consider this facility going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with 80 plus vehicles in and out per hour, with the peak hours being 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. And would that be a minimal negative impact if it was your place across the street? Now, it's not my place across the street, so it's not impacting me. But, and the proponents correctly state that, this is the zone or this property is zoned for this use, and it would be a significant significantly add to the economic base of the city. But I think that the code, I guess it would be section 1645-040B1, requires that you assure that it's not more than a minimum negative impact. So that's primarily my concerns. On Haynes Road, I think that the mitigation that's in there for communicating to drivers could be strengthened by taking the language from the Lancaster Engineering from their review, where they specify that you prohibit. And I guess I'm not sure how the enforcement would work when they don't really control all of the truck drivers. But anyway, it seems like to take the language of the of Lancaster might strengthen it. I don't know if I'm out of time yet or not. I had a reference to the. Does that mean I'm out of time?
No.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
To the cost sharing aspect, I believe it talks about the cost that's to be included in that calculation is to be based upon costs that are in the TSP. And the connection through what used to be Auto Road, now that location will be changed, but from Malino or extending Walnut, it seems like those costs should be included in the calculation of the participants' share. At least that's my reading of the criteria. So it's all I have.
Do you have any questions? Thank you very much. Okay. Ms. Patty Green.
Good evening, Council. My name is Patty Green. I live at 2392 Southeast First Avenue. I happen, to live at the end of Walnut. My driveway is the Walnut. I've been following the Shakespeare project since the first meeting with them. And at that first meeting, I'm going to go off this because quite a few things have changed in the first meeting they did with the neighborhood. One was they were going to have their exit out on Malino. And now I guess that's changed. They're not bringing anything out. So I don't understand that.
That's a county issue.
Well, see, that's what I don't understand, because First Avenue is also, it's never in any map I've ever seen have been a truck route or going to be any of the infrastructure or anything. I haven't seen it. I talked to these gentlemen at this meeting. They told me they'd do the traffic study. I personally went up to them and spoke to them and said, I'd like to see that. What I see of this traffic study is the only place they didn't do the traffic study is in front of my house at Walnut. So I put a camera out because I have cameras all over my property. And in less than 24 hours, there were over 500 trucks and vehicles going by. So I'd just like to ask why there was no traffic study done at Walnut. And I see a road going right through my property. I have spoke to Brian a few times. I didn't like the way he kind of blew me off on that, but we're talking about a place that is going to have, if my math is correct, 840 trucks a day. There's going to be a truck that's going to try and come out of their building and try and turn right to go to Walnut. You can't do that. And there's no room because, first off, they're not set far back from Walnut. As now we've heard, they're going to use that as their entrance and their exit 24 hours a day. But, okay, I'm getting off because I've heard so much tonight that I haven't heard from these gentlemen. Nobody has returned my phone calls. I've called, I've asked specifically. I'm not good with the water runoff, and when I first spoke to Brian Brown, he didn't really know much about this project. So I decided I'd start coming to the meetings, because I know nothing about this. I'm a country girl, and live off-grid half my life. Just moved my dad down off-grid. It's very quiet on this street, besides all the trucks that we have to deal with now, and the cars. And even the school buses, the trucks going down Walnut, because there's businesses down there. Canby Excavation is down there. All those trucks come out and they're facing the front of my house. Not one of those trucks have been registered somewhere else, but not coming down Walnut. So very few, all Sequoia Parkway, all of them come out Walnut and turn to go out First and Hines to 99. Or South Air, and they just, all the Oregon City, everybody. Saturday and on a Saturday, there's over 500 vehicles, including trucks, that are going back and forth. I don't understand, and I have called Kent into the county, and you're right, and you can't get anywhere with them because he didn't know anything about anything anyway, which is very strange because when I said at the first meeting, Brian notified one of the councilwomen that, hey, these Shakespeare guys, you haven't heard about it, but they're going to fast track this thing. This is huge. What my main concern is, they're not far enough away from Walnut. They're bringing 3 driveways out there saying on First Avenue. There's not supposed to be, you look at the projects they've turned down already because they wanted driveways to come out first. They're not allowed to. I'm good with the industrial parkway. Use what you built. Use your own parkway. They should have put all their infrastructure, all their employees, their trucks out on Sequoia Parkway.
Any questions for Patty? Okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Okay. Curtis Green. I didn't know if you guys were going to do it together, but apparently not.
Well, that's the first time I've seen you set the clock.
My name is Curtis Green. I live at 2392 Southeast First Avenue. We know the development is going to happen at the park. That's what it's for. This is huge. I work in warehouses every day in my job, and I know what 500,000 square feet of business is all about. So it's really just First Avenue. If you look back in 2008, 2009, there were businesses that tried to go into that same property and were turned down because they wanted to egress on First Avenue. And the language is they're not allowed to. So if they were to take these trucks out onto Walnut, go through Sequoia, get to 99, there really wouldn't be that big of an issue. But they're not. They're going to use First Avenue. And so if you go back, look at your predecessors' records in 08 and 09, you'll see where businesses were not allowed to do what you guys are trying to do now. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Wayne Johnson. Please state your name and address, please.
Wayne Johnson, 22969 South Haines Road. And I've lived there since 2001, January 2001, and I've seen considerable increased traffic on Haines Road. Once Fred Meyer was put in, and then of course the industrial park. So my concern is another doubling of traffic, especially trucks, on Haines Road. I would think that regardless of maybe what the delivery drivers are told, the suppliers coming in with their semi-trucks, especially if they're coming from the north, would definitely be using Haines Road, as I've seen other trucks do in the last 18 years. So I was going to suggest, after looking at maps and so forth, that consider extending Milano Road out through Otto to a new interchange on 99E to provide industrial park access, direct access, not knowing that it's already in the plan, except now I need to emphasize that that plan should be moved up and not just talk about, well, we'll get to it when the intersection at Sequoia fails. And that'll be way too late. And you see a lot of counties especially, and I realize we don't have much control here over Clackamas County, but you look at Washington County and the problems they have with their traffic and the buildup that occurred there, industrial buildup and no infrastructure to support all that traffic. The same thing can happen everywhere else. If we don't look far enough forward to build the infrastructure for the traffic, then we end up always being behind. And I'm afraid that this is going to be another case where it's going to be, it's already difficult to get into town, and we've already heard about this condition of Southeast First. I too have to drive down the middle of the road carefully to avoid the edge that's breaking down. And so our future is going to be nothing but a big bottleneck in town, on the edge of town, if we don't look forward sooner and push some of these ideas, like the extension of Otto Road and 4th Avenue over to Milano. If this project can't provide access off of Walnut or Milano and has to use First, then there's got to be a more direct route to 99E, and that would have to be to Otto. Okay.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Okay. So I have a Robert Taylor, a Vicki Adamson, Tom, can't read the last name, I'm sorry. Oh, Rushton, and a Julie Rushton, and they are all ceding their time to Regina Taylor. So, Regina, if you're still here, there you are. He is, I can do him first if that's okay with you. Okay, that would be Terry Tolles. Please state your name and address.
Good evening, I'm Terry Tolles at 11657 Southwest Bremen Avenue in Portland. I am a real estate broker and been working on this particular project for about 23 years. You see a sign out front, says Candy Pioneer Industrial Park. I got that name. It was my original design. Alan Patterson back here is his daughter's a graphic artist, and she's the one that did the final design. I'm exceptionally familiar with what has taken place in the park. I hear some things that, well, they're just not true, and it bothers me just because you guys may be making decisions based on stuff that I don't think is true. For example, the roadway, as far as First Avenue is concerned, there's no doubt there was a member in the Transportation Department of Clackamas County who had basically his rules and regs and how he viewed that things should be interpreted in the code book, and he was adamantly opposed to any access on any road except for the local street. He retired, and when he retired, I actually even got notices from several people at the county says, good news. Well, honestly it was. We had somebody that was very receptive to recognizing there are times that maybe you can make some exceptions. I've represented the property involved along with Alan Patterson, the other broker, here tonight also, for 23 years. And quite frankly, I would have known if our users or would-be users left because of not being able to get access on First, for example. Let me just tell you, that's the first I've heard of it, so I think that's kind of interesting. It's that type of thing. I'd be happy to address history, if any of you need the history, on what's gone on the infrastructure, roadways. Kathy Polly, who came up here, was too polite to say it was her dad that hopped us in. Well, this is after he had the governor in his truck a year or two before, but he popped several of us in his pickup truck, drove us across the fields and people's yards, said, here's where you should put the annexation road. So we started the effort to get the additional road to Highway 99E about 20 years ago. And I will say, to the city's credit, quite frankly, I got to tell you, Rick Robertson's been working on this access road. No, I don't personally care whether, I'm not trying to sound that I don't care. I don't have a dog in the fight as to whether the access road goes out across an extension of Hazeldale Way or Walnut or off of Milano Road. It's just that the further to the east you go, the longer the road, the more the cost. I understand that. The intersection there at Milano Road down at the railroad track, the reason you don't see that intersection improved has been primarily because they never got the funding for it. It was on like a 5-year plan for as many years as I can recall, and then more recently I found out that's not the case, or at least they never got the funding. So you've got to come up with a solution that works funding-wise, and the city has been actively working now to try to solve the issue as it relates to an access road. And it is also true that we have a catch-22 from the standpoint of, yes, people don't want to come to Canby if in fact they feel like they're coming across cow trails in order to get there. We worked probably the first 6-7 years that at least 6-7 years, convincing other brokers, Canby's got an industrial park, folks, let's do something with it. Okay, you can go ahead and put in the piece of paper that you present to people that you're going to get one, but your better clients are most likely going to go walk away if in fact they're supposed to come to something on a hope and a prayer. So, or you can come in and say, all right, we know we need one, and there are all so many of these things, it's the tipping the balance. So you'd like to see a certain amount of activity, and then at that point, well, then we'll put the road in. I don't know how you work that balance, except for to say that, again, the city's actively working toward that. I've heard time frames of 2 more years and we'll have it. Then I've heard tonight 3 to 5. That's the longest time frame that I've heard in recent history. It doesn't matter. my point ends up being simply that a lot of this stuff has been in the mill. It's active. I think the city is well aware of the fact they are trying to help us work that out. And I'd be open for questions if you have them later on. I certainly know a lot of the history.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Sounds like he's open for a cup of coffee. So, again, so that I don't get out of order, I've got Julie Rushton, Tom Rushton, Vicki Adamson, and Robert Taylor all ceding their time to Regina Taylor. Regina, you have 25 minutes.
I have 2 handouts.
What? Brian, what's one? Thank you.
Okay. So my name is Regina Taylor. I live at 173 Southwest 6th Avenue in Canby, Oregon. I'm the person who sent in the email that I believe was forwarded to each of you already today. Hopefully you've read it, but if not, you're going to hear it now because I need to put it on public record by reading it. Some of it's been covered and answered already, but again, we're going to go through this from the beginning. I did ask about 2 items that I thought was missing from the packet. We've covered that because I didn't see a signature page, anybody's signature at the end. I couldn't tell that those were complete documents, so we'll pass on that. I accept that those are complete packages. I have a question about the building utilization, and that has been covered as well. That was about the point of sale and the will call areas. The Shakespeare Project individuals indicate that there will not be retail here, so I will pass on that. My next object was street and access related. And this one has been primarily answered. This was why the site plans for the applicant still show 3 accesses on Southwest First when the county says they can only have 2, and I understand that that's in the works. That has to be figured out before this can move forward, so bringing that to your attention, but I won't go too much further into it because it's already been done tonight. I am concerned, however, that the letter from the Clackamas County reviewed an application for a warehouse of 514,500 square feet, while the city of Canby indicates the size is 50% larger than that, or 755,000 square feet, and the DKS traffic report was conducted using the full build-out of 755,000 square feet. But the verbiage of the letter from Clackamas County Department of Transportation suggests the county was not aware of the full impact or final size of this development, and they responded based upon incomplete or inaccurate information. That bothers me. I'd like to know if they would have a different answer if they knew the full size of the project. Traffic-related questions have been somewhat answered, but I'm going to go ahead and read this because it's very important to me. The DKS traffic survey breaks the survey data into 2 categories: the light vehicles for employees and visitors, and the large trucks, or the product distribution trucks. Concerning the product distribution vehicles, it appears these will be primarily 18-wheelers or tractor-trailer rigs. Does this business use many of the smaller, more nimble box trucks that many beverage distributors use? We've heard tonight that they will use some, but I haven't heard the percentage amount, and that does impact traffic. The size, weight, and maneuverability of box trucks would make a great difference. As an example, a queue of large, heavy tractor-trailer rigs at an intersection is a completely different situation than a queue of smaller box trucks, as well as a different environmental impact. An example is the length of the queue, the time needed to clear the queues, the exhaust emissions, noise, plus wear and tear on the highway surface due to the vehicle weight. I recommend consulting the applicant with details regarding their willingness to use smaller, cleaner fuel trucks other than diesel trucks used by the large trucks, and supporting revised traffic studies by the city and county to compare this option with the current one. It does affect the queuing rates. That's part of the traffic survey. The city would then make use of the city could then make use of the smaller, cleaner fuel trucks a condition of approval. The traffic question related to the conditions of approval, which recommends communicating the need to avoid certain streets to the drivers of the Shakespeare's tractor-trailer rigs. The city recently adopted an ordinance, and we talked about this a little bit today, but the wording was completely off. The ordinance is 10-04145, trucks prohibited on restricted streets, which defines a local truck, and this is important, as any truck that begins or ends, not begins and ends, it begins or ends a trip within the city limits of the city of Canby, and indicates that a local truck can use 13th Avenue. The Shakespeare trucks therefore qualify as local trucks, making it legal for them to use 13th Avenue and some of the others that we've talked about tonight, and 13th Avenue is the location of the residential neighborhood and schools, and the location of the recently proposed sports center complex behind Ackerman. So here's all these diesel trucks going past all of our soccer kids. Police can enforce ordinances, but what power does the city have to enforce conditions of approval? Who determined the impact area to be studied for the traffic survey, and why were the intersections in downtown Canby transportation system not included? The DKS traffic survey reported a high volume of the distribution trucks are expected to use the Barlow Road and Aurora routes to the freeway, requiring passage through 5 downtown Canby traffic lights in some manner, making it logical to include that area in the traffic impact survey. I visualize a tsunami wave effect where the truck traffic starting at the industrial center, surging towards each downtown traffic light with no traffic survey to advise us of the impact to those intersections. The DKS traffic survey is also silent on the impact of train travel through Canby or the impact of the major events that are held at the Clackamas County Fair and Event Center, which experiences traffic buildups of their own. Research should be done and presented for public review that shows the impact Shakespeare will have on the event center activities. Packet 1, page 96, Lancaster Engineering reviewed the DKS traffic intersection analysis, identified missing, unreliable, and/or unsupported information which they questioned. They also indicate if the city desires Territorial Road could be added to the list. We talked about that tonight. Let's please make sure Territorial is added to the list. Expansion related. We talked a little bit already tonight about the time frame for the expansion of the facility. I do want to point out that they started out with a beginning amount of 62 berths. To quote the applicant, it says a total of 3 loading berths are required for this project from the city ordinance, and at least 62 berths will be provided with the initial phase of the development, and accommodations to double that count with the addition of dock doors on the future loading area along the west side of the building. I'm not sure that we're seeing the full effect in our traffic surveys of all of these docks. I'm still questioning that traffic survey. We did talk about the emergency exits, and they promise us they won't use those off of Malino or Walnut, so I'll pass on that next section. Okay, conditional use related. The authorization of the conditional use must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. In the comprehensive plan, there's a section called Environmental Concerns Element. I'm going to read it to you. Policy number 3-R. Canby shall require, it's not an option, Canby shall require that all existing and future development activities meet the prescribed standards for air, water, and land pollution. The implementation measures, how we're going to do this. We shall include performance standards relative to pollution as part of the development review process applying to industrial development. We don't do it for residential, so you don't see that very often, but this is a requirement, and I didn't see that in the packet from our applicant. And B, a little bit harder to apply is participate in regional planning efforts and programs to upgrade the environment. But A is a requirement. Note that Canby Policy Number 3-R implementation measures above require the land application package to include performance standards relative to pollution as part of the development review process applying to industrial development. I am unable to locate the performance standards relative to pollution in the packet. I believe the size of the Shakespeare project warrants an examination of this information. My reasoning is below. Air quality. The DKS traffic survey indicates the Shakespeare project will generate an estimated 1,568 additional daily trips through Canby, and half will be generated by the large truck distribution. Typically, tractor-trailer trucks are diesel-powered, quite smelly, and vehicle emissions are a major cause of pollution according to DEQ and a health hazard. The 2015 Comprehensive Plan, page 79, includes Canby Policy Number 3R regarding air pollution, which states Canby is adjacent to the Portland non-attainment, meaning we can't attain the goal, non-attainment and air quality maintenance area, and categorizes Canby, the Canby urbanizing area, as a Class 2 Prevention of Significant Deterioration, or PSD area. We're in trouble, boys and girls. The Federal Government Clean Air Act requires each state to monitor and report air quality. The state of Oregon DEQ maintains a monitoring station less than 4 miles from Canby at Broken Wheel Farm on Spangler Road in Karas to measure poor air quality that affect health, including ozone particles. The comprehensive plan states that Karas monitoring station has the highest ozone readings recorded in the state. I'm going to jump down a little bit and show you some more information. You've read all this, I'm assuming, because you got the email earlier today. According to the report submitted by the Oregon DEQ to the federal government to satisfy the Clean Air Act requirements, the monitoring station at Spangler Road in Karas has reached or exceeded the maximum acceptable range of 65 to 70 parts of ozone particulate per billion, 17 years between 1991 and 2013. That is 17 years of non-attainment out of a 22-year span. And if you don't think those trucks aren't going to make a difference, I just think you're wrong. Through 2013, the federal unacceptable number of ozone particles was 70. In 2014, the Federal Clean Air Act was modified to monitor a range of unacceptable ozone particulates instead of specifying a single target number, with the established range of 65 to 70 parts per billion. I provided you a chart on the next page. As you can see, we not only exceed the number of parts per billion that is acceptable, we far exceed it. Most alarming, however, is the rate at which unhealthy ozone levels captured at the Karas monitoring station has increased since 2013, since our industrial park has started to grow. Below is the trend displaying the comparison of the 8-hour average maximum parts particulate per billion and the 3-year average. These are the statistics the state of Oregon is required to submit to the federal government to satisfy the Clean Air Act. There's our numbers. 2013, we were 65 to 62. Since 60 is the lowest we should be going, that's over. 2014, 72 to 62. 2015, 73 to 63. We're getting worse. 2016 wasn't too bad, 63 to 65. But last year, 2017, 116 over 72. And I provided you my sources there for the 3 reports that I used from the DEQ. Okay, going on. Environmental concerns element concerning wetlands. Finding number 10 this is the comprehensive plan finding number 10-R, says that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service produced an inventory of 10 wetlands situated within Canby. Each site has been assigned a number and is shown in the U.S. Department of Interior Fish and Wildlife Service map. 2 sites are in close proximity to the Shakespeare project. They are numbered as number 5 and 6. According to the comprehensive plan, the city is required to, prior to approval of, and as required by the Oregon revised statute, this is a state statute, not something the city can ignore, 227-350, any development activity which may be near a wetland, the city will require a delineation of the boundary of the wetlands by the State Division of State Lands. Since the wetlands have not been delineated, it is impossible to know exactly the distance from the Shakespeare project to the edge of each wetland, but my rough estimate is 1,000 feet from wetland number 5 and 700 feet from wetland number 6, using Google Earth as my guide. Both of these wetlands are also in the general area of the proposed alternative truck route from Southeast 1st Street to 99E, which may preclude or change those plans. And I put the information there. I just gave you a screenshot of what it shows on the comprehensive plan regarding Site 5 and 6. Policy number 10R specifically states, this is a screenshot of it, but I'll read it to you. Canby shall attempt to minimize the adverse impacts of new development on wetlands. The implementation measures. The city will assist the State Division of State Lands and Army Corps of Engineers in enforcement of state and federal regulations, ORS 227-350, related to any development activity which may adversely impact wetlands. Prior to the approval of, and as required by ORS 227-350, any development activity which may be near a wetland, the city may require a delineation, will require a delineation of the boundary of the wetlands by the State Division of State Lands. Okay. Applying the wetland issue to the applicant's application package on page 184 in the pre-application meeting with the subject of stormwater site grading and water runoff. Here's my comment. The city's advisors have indicated the stormwater management is a bit challenging in the area of the proposed development. With two inventoried wetlands nearby, extra caution should be taken to protect this area. Also on page 183 is a conversation regarding grading the property and stockpiling all this dirt. I think extra caution should be enforced due to those two wetlands. And I gave you a copy of that application there. Regarding the development of the site itself, the industrial plan, the industrial area master plan requirements applies to this project and lists recommendations for open space south of and adjacent Southeast 1st Avenue, as well as creation of an open space gateway between the industrial area and the logging road forest trail. Brian mentioned part of this, but he overlooked the parts that specifically say this needs to be done on Malino Road. Let's find that. The first open space area is located along the northern edge of the study area, south of and adjacent to Southeast 1st Avenue. This area is associated with the drainage and small pond located on the south side of 1st Avenue and should serve as an opportunity for passive recreation, limited habitat enhancement, and as a portion of the 1st Avenue pathway link to the area designated as a commercial manufacturing in the city's comprehensive plan. I'm not positive, but I believe that's part of the emerald necklace that Cammy's has been working towards. There's a map from the industrial master plan that I provided for you there showing the routes that the sidewalk open space sidewalk should follow. And the second one is an elaboration of that. And then I provided two shots of what the wider streets should be in that area. The open space is actually just wider sidewalks. And if we don't include this now, or at least have the discussion now, even if it doesn't come to fruition, we need to have a discussion now. If we don't have these discussions, we'll never have them. According to this, the collector streets need to have a 74-foot right-of-way. And on the next page, it says Malino Road and 1st Avenue should have a 72-foot right-of-way. We need to have the discussion. This is the time. Okay. Conditional use concerns. I note the applicant has requested a conditional use due to the 12 employees per developed acre. However, there are other issues that may also require conditional use, and the applicant may need to update their application accordingly. I'm going to read those ordinances. 1650-010, authorization to grant or deny conditional uses. A conditional use listed in this title shall be permitted, altered, or denied in accordance with the standards and procedures of this chapter. In the case of a use existing prior to the effective date of the ordinance, codified in this title as a conditional use, a change in the use or reduction of an area or an alteration of the structure shall require the prior issuance of a conditional use permit. Here's the part. In judging whether or not a conditional use permit shall be approved or denied, the Planning Commission shall weigh the proposal's positive and negative features that would result in authorizing the particular development at the location proposed, and to approve such use, the council shall find that the following criteria are either met, can be met by observance of conditions, or are not applicable. The proposal shall be consistent with the policy of the comprehensive plan and requiremms of this title and other applicable policies of the city. Okay, we talked about the comprehensive plan and which ones it's not applying to right now. There's the wetlands and the air quality haven't been met. The characteristics of the site are suitable for the proposed use considering size, shape, design, location, topography, existence of improvements, and natural features. The wetlands falls here, and I'm going to cover another one in just a moment. All required public facilities and services exist to adequately meet the needs of the proposed development. That's not true. One of our public services is traffic, and there's 2 intersections that already fail. Adding more traffic to it means we certainly can't provide those public facilities. The proposed use will not alter the character of the surrounding areas in a manner which substantially limits or precludes the use of surrounding properties for the uses as listed as permitted in the zone. I'm going to come back to that one in a moment. 16-35040, conditional uses. Any proposed site development, change in use, land division, or other action that results in any of the following requires additional use approval in the industrial overlay zone, and that's where this is at. This one, they're already working on number 1, which is less than 12 employees per developed acre. You all have to talk about that and vote on whether you think having less than 12 employees per acre is you're okay with this. Here's some that we haven't covered. Number 2, more than 60 acres total in the industrial overlay zoning that is occupied by a single use or business. For the purposes of this section, businesses classified in the same NAICS industry group, it's a 4-digit code, are considered to be in the same use. This section is intended to apply cumulatively to all properties in the zone. So do we have more than 60 acres total using the same NAICS code as this group? We probably do. Dragonberry. We have at least 3 warehouses over there already, and this one's 43 acres. I don't think they can go in there. Number 3, utilization of any public service or utility to which an extent that the utility would not be able to supply all other uses projected in its current long-range plans. That one's probably okay. Number 5, I guess, is they've answered. In any commercial zone overlaying the industrial overlay zoning, any retail or commercial use with a building footprint exceeding 50,000 square feet. I think this one is more light industrial and doesn't fit into that one. Number 6 would apply though. In any light industrial zoning overlay, any retail or commercial use not related to or supportive of the primary industrial use of the park. I'm still questioning whether there's any retail, but if there isn't, and they stick with that, then 6 is okay. And then if they do have retail zoning, it can't be more than 15% of the footprint. Number 2, however, I did call Brian's office and ask if there are more than 60 acres of warehouse cumulative in that area. Okay, I didn't get an answer back. Some of these we've already covered today, so I'm reading them so I don't just waste your time here. Okay, the retail space we've covered. Here's a question. Consider how Shakespeare impacts the following. 1650-010D. And this is the one that says that, okay, I'll just read this. How does the placement of the proposed alternative truck bypass road to 99E impact the future planned development located in the area special concern J? Would this area still be able to be developed as residential with the placement of an alternative truck route to 99E dissecting the neighborhood? So if we go to the next page and we read what Area J says, it says, and from the comprehensive plan, Area J is a large tract of multiple owners bounded on the west side by 99E, Southeast First Avenue to the south, Haynes Road to the east, and the urban growth boundary to the north. It's this piece of property right across the road from the proposed development. The area contains numerous single-family homes, a pub, the spinning wheel, several churches, and significant open space and natural features. The most notable is a large man-made lake located in the approximate center of the area. Because of the existing mix of uses, this area presents a unique opportunity for the city to master plan the area and create appropriate zoning language and/or zoning overlays to encourage a mixed-density neighborhood. Until a master plan is adopted, this area should be held in reserve, and properties in this area should remain a low priority for annexation. I would assume that also means a low priority to put a truck lane right through the middle of it. The creation of this master plan should be a high priority on the list for long-term planning project for the city. Through the 2002-2003 public process to locate appropriate areas for medium and high-density residential land, this area was found to be appropriate for the equivalent of a minimum of 12 acres of high-density residential development and a minimum of 15 acres of medium-density development. During the master planning process, these numbers would be used as a guideline, but basically I think putting your road to the middle of that is going to prevent that from being developed.
Thank you, Jean. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
I did give you a list of questions for the chairman that I'd like to have you go over. You probably saw that.
We have one final person that wishes to speak. That would be Mr. Buzz Wygant. Buzz, if you'll state your name and address, that'd be great.
Buzz Wygant, 1441 South Ivy, Unit 1201, which is Hope Village. I'm sixth generation of a Canby, farming all my life, and we had berries planted on this property that we farmed for several years. I do have mixed emotions. I am a farmer, but this was determined where the industrial area was going to be in 1977. They drew the lines by different agencies. We didn't do it. The farmers, the owners, we didn't do it. I have the Canby Herald front page right now that shows that this is where the industrial property will be someday. And I didn't think it would be, but it is. Okay, my brother, was a truck driver. He reminded me of something. I didn't plan on relating this tonight, but I think it's kind of appropriate. He reminded me that things that you did have, that you do have now, and that you will have, all of that, somewhere along the line, a truck is involved. Now that's bugged my mind for a long time, trying to figure out one thing where a truck was not involved. But you have to go back possibly the whole distance, and you'll find out that if you do find something, let me know, that I can sleep better at night. So it's just something to think about. Trucks are here, and like I said, everything that you did have, do have, and will have a truck is involved somewhere along the line. Thank you.
Any questions for Buzz? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. You have about 10 minutes for rebuttal. I'm sure that there's a lot to unpack here, so would you like to step forward?
Give it a shot.
Probably going to put something on the record real quick about a conflict of interest.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of this. Apparently Tofty Farms submitted a comment. I am an attorney here in town and I'm in active litigation with them right now. I don't think there's enough of a relationship there with their comment to what we're dealing with right now, so I still plan to participate, but we have ethical rules and I don't know what the ethical rules are here, but I thought it'd probably be better to place it on the record.
Okay, I guess at this juncture, with this new information, I will ask, does anybody have any problem with Ryan participating in this? Conflict of interest?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was a question for me.
Brian, just
Yeah, no, I think we're okay with
Okay.
it's
Just so it's clear,
disclosure.
I'm opposing Tofty Farms. They're not my client, so.
No, thank you, appreciate that.
Anybody else out there? You're good to go. Okay, now you're ready.
Yeah, sure. So I think it would, in 10 minutes, trying to parse our way through a mix of questions and comments and everything else. We won't try to get into the real details. Certainly would offer up if there are final questions the commissioners have. Would be happy to answer those. If there's something there that is at the front of your mind that needs some additional clarification from us, we would certainly welcome that. I just, beyond all those other details, I just had a couple of comments. And Buzz, it was nice to hear from him. I grew up on farms and working farms in Monmouth, so I'm familiar with grass seed farms and everything else, and I appreciated his comments. Didn't expect that. That was kind of neat. 1977, I think is what he said, when people first started drawing the lines. And I'd asked some questions to city staff, and Jamie kind of helped me out with it, with just a couple of questions about the history here. So in 1984, the city's comprehensive plan was adopted. At that time, the property that is now Canby Industrial Park was designated as industrial. So that was 1984. Canby Pioneer Industrial Plan was adopted in 1998, and the annexation that created the industrial park occurred in 2000. That was 20 years, whatever that is. It was a long time ago. Certainly been great progress, and you've got some nice tenants out here and some good businesses, and you have a lot of good things ahead of you here. One of the other things I think that maybe gets lost in all these technical details, and I kind of commented on them. I mean, first there's the 275 new employees to the city of Canby. I can't think that could be understated in any way. And then the investment that occurs. There's the real estate investment that's here. The property taxes that are generated from a 43-acre industrial development is significant. And if you go and look and see where those property taxes go, they go to schools. It's almost 50% ends up in some form of education, and then you've got 30% that ends up in services, fire departments, and things like that. So that's just the city, the property tax associated with this type of development. There's the investment of the applicant here to improve a bunch of the city's roads, half streets and county roads. So Moino, a half street there, a half street at First, a half street at Walnut. That includes lighting, sidewalks, storm drain, a half street to full standards to meet the city's requirements. That's a significant amount of investment there. The SDC fees that we pay, parks, schools, traffic, there's a very large traffic fee that gets paid out. And of course that goes to different places. But I just want the commissioners to remember that there is a significant amount of investment that goes in with this too, beyond all these technical pieces that we have, and I think that's important to remember. So I think we'll turn it back over to you, unless there's something specific that you want answered from us. I'm not sure. I could talk about the wetland question. I'm very familiar with wetlands. We have a letter from a wetland consultant from last spring that did a delineation, or at least went to our site, this proposed site, walked the site, did all the things that they do. There's no wetlands on our site, and I've never been involved in a project where it's bounded by city and county roads, and then as long as you take care of your business on your site, the impacts to wetlands 1,000 feet away has never been a problem for the hundreds of acres that we've developed in the metro area. So just as an example, Commissioner, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, just really quick, if you can just address it really quick. Ms. Taylor brought up the 12 employee minimum rule. Can you just spend 30 seconds kind of addressing that and talking to us about, I'm bad at math.
Yeah, we don't meet it.
So
you don't see that very often in cities with that kind of density. It's a good idea, and if you can get manufacturing and things like that, and sometimes you can meet it. We still have this is a lot of people for industrial development in the outer boundaries of the metro. You might see some denser development, as you get into more of the core areas, and you might see higher counts. This is a really good employee count, frankly, for a building. We don't meet that standard that's there. So, for instance, a Georgia Pacific warehouse on the waterfront in Portland doesn't get 275. They have 40 forklift drivers and some warehouse folks, and that's it, in a similar sized building. So this is doing really well, frankly.
Any other questions? For the DKS gentleman, I have real concerns about the traffic. Patty Green associates cameras out there. How many trucks went by your place in 500?
Over 500. That was just that was just in from morning till about 9 o'clock at night.
Trucks and cars?
Both, yes, sir.
Trucks and cars.
Yeah, not just trucks. Buses, the school buses.
And this is current, right? Okay, so how does that reconcile with your traffic study, which it sounds to me like this is a real world, boots on the ground example of what these people are going to be living with currently, what they live with currently, and what you're saying is really kind of lessons. It's still a large amount, but I'm not sure how. Number one, I know the road. I'm not sure that road can take all the increased traffic. So the traffic is a real concern. I think most of the people here, including Ms. Taylor, even though she had a long list of things, traffic is the huge issue, all the other stuff aside, at least for me. And I can't reconcile in my own mind how this is going to work traffic-wise for you as well as for us, because that road is horrid. I know that. I drive it. So I'm kind of surprised that we can't get something done to improve the road to make it easier for you guys. I mean, this is a horror. I mean, it really is a bad situation in my estimation.
You're specifically talking about first.
That is correct.
You want to talk about the tubes that you...
Yeah, sure. So,
counts that you would have thought.
Yeah, so just broadly, I mean, first of all, definitely completely acknowledge concerns about traffic. I mean, it's a concern everywhere, no matter what development, which city, what the type of use is, it's always a concern at the foremost of people's minds. So for what the traffic analysis we did, again, we collected input from both the city, the county, and ODOT at specific facilities that they wanted us to go ahead and analyze. We collected traffic counts at those locations during both the morning and the evening peak hours. So again, that's the hours when there's typically the most traffic, the most congestion during those periods. And again, that's what we typically design for as far as capacity and the delay at the intersections, those kind of things. So those intersections included out at Sequoia and the highway, Sequoia and Hazeldale. There was about 10 locations in total. One of those locations was not included. That was Walnut and First. Walnut is a local road. Standard practice is typically that local roads aren't really a major junction as part of the transportation system. We usually look at the higher class facilities that have the higher traffic volume, higher delays, like the arterials, the collectors. So again, that's kind of standard practice, and we didn't hear comments or requests back from the public agency staff. Again, we collected traffic counts, looked at those. Not having collected counts specifically at that intersection, I can't speak to those. 500 vehicles during the course of a day. A road that has one lane in each direction can typically accommodate about 50% more than that in each direction during a single hour. So as far as roadway capacity and traffic volumes, I mean, it's well under the capacity. Understanding that's different than livability and, having traffic close to your home. But just from a pure numbers engineering standpoint, a single lane roadway in each direction, capacity-wise, can carry about 700 vehicles in each hour, each direction, and that depends on driveway spacing. Per hour, yes. And so 500 during the course of a day is far from that.
All righty then.
Again, that's just from a capacity standpoint.
And the counts are in our traffic study, right? So Hazeldale, Sequoia, all that information is in the traffic study of the public.
Yeah, we've got, there's numbers for all that in the traffic study. Just kind of as on the other end of the spectrum, a road like 99E during the peak hour, 2 lanes, northbound or southbound in the peak hour, that's about 2,000 vehicles during a single hour. So it's kind of a comparison.
Okay.
I think, just to expand on what you just spoke of, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to make sure that, not only the applicant's aware of, but some of the audience is aware of some of the conditions of approval that are being put in the document for restrictions of road use. And we've talked about how those might be enforced. But Haynes Road was mentioned, for example, and that's, I'm reading here, Haynes Road between the project site and OR 99E to the north is a restricted area. So what we're anticipating is that, that these folks are not going to run their trucks on Haynes Road. And I think that that's one of the conditions of our approval, that they're not going to do that. Now, I did have one question about, restricting traffic, and it's for the applicant, but it's for staff later. We heard Ms. Taylor talk about the definition of through trucking versus local trucking, and that anything that begins or ends at this facility would be considered a local truck, and therefore not subject to the restriction. And I'd like to, I'm not expecting to answer this moment, but I'd like to make sure I understand where the city lies on that. Sorry.
No.
Excellent. Didn't have my mic on there.
Did you want me to answer now?
Yeah, if you have an answer now.
I think I tried to answer that before, as I disagreed with the conclusions that Regina had in her letter, is that a starting destination in the city that is delivering statewide into the Portland metro area is not a local truck. It's a truck that should be designated to use official truck routes.
Thank you. And I guess my question to the applicant is...
Verified?
I didn't...
Can that be verified? Or is that just your understanding?
Well, it's a difficult thing to do. I mean, you need to talk to the police officers as far as enforcing that kind of thing. But that's where you start when you want to try to post signage, local truck traffic only. And so we have to allow deliveries to individual businesses within town and to homes, et cetera, and they're by trucks. But so it's when you're starting one place in town and going to another place that you're allowing the trucks on those non-designated truck routes. You know, and I don't know, maybe I can't address that well enough. I know that we just changed our city ordinance in the wording to help us enforce it restricting non-local truck traffic on non-designated truck routes. That's about all I can comment on it. And the enforcement's another matter. We're going to try signage. We're going to try to improve the police department's ability to give tickets by the change of the ordinance that we just made regarding those. But I wouldn't think that the distribution trucks are appropriate trucks on non-truck routes. Therefore, they really shouldn't be on 13th Avenue or Township Road.
So for Commissioner Mills, you had, I think it was, the question I heard is the conditions that have been.
The road restrictions as a condition of approval, I guess I'm hesitating to read them all off, although I'm happy to do that. I'm not sure.
No, I'm familiar with them. Yeah, so those roads, we took the staff, that part of the staff report, and I sent that to the tenant's operations director and said, can you live with these conditions? And they studied it, and they said it has no impact on how they plan, their 140 drivers, how they plan to use the road network. Now, there's the second piece, which is the drivers that they do not control. And that could be anyone, just like delivering to your business or anywhere else, just exactly what Brian's talking about. Those drivers, they're professional drivers, they need to follow the posted signage. So if the city has posted signage that says 13th Street is not, it's for local trucks only, they need to follow those rules, and they get a ticket if they don't. I mean, that's, there can be some advisory, and I did talk to the tenant about this. They can provide some advisory to those suppliers, bringing 53s and others in, and ask for them to comply. But when it comes down to it, those are just like any other driver on the road that needs to follow the legal laws.
And I guess I'd like to add that I'm assuming right now and recognize that Haynes Road is a county road, not a city road, so I don't know how enforcement would work there if we, so that's another point of concern for traffic in the area. So this is, you've heard the folks, and I guess I'd say it's a concern that I have also.
Yeah, sure. And we heard it from one of the citizens about trucks and 53s particularly. It's unlikely, I think, and we heard it from that person who understands trucking, they want to go to a safe intersection where they can make all their turning movements. They don't want to have accidents. This is their livelihood. They're going to go to Sequoia and 99. Haynes is, I've driven through that before. It's a scary intersection. I mean, it's a big, wide open state highway. And those drivers are going to take the extra 3 minutes that they might save going that other route, and they're going to go down and make a safe turn. That's what I believe. And the drivers that are in the employ of this tenant aren't going to go that route because they won't have a job if they do. And that will be easy. So, and we've had this specific discussion. I mean, we took Brian's staff report and we've given it to them.
One last follow-up, if you please, Mr. Chairman, and that is we talked about drivers that work, that are your employees, and then there's a percentage of trucks that are coming in that are not your employees.
Right.
Do you have a split? Is it 50-50? Is it going to be trucks that are driven by employees versus suppliers? Is it a 50-50 split? Is it?
Knowing how this distribution model works, there are more drivers employed by this tenant than there are in the delivery, in
big batches coming in, littler batches going in.
That's exactly it.
Right.
Yep, that's exactly. This is a warehouse building, and its job is to hold inventory. Big shipments come in, small go out. And just as a reminder about one of the reasons why Canby was a nice spot amongst those other cities is its logistical location. Half of these trips go to other parts of the state, and then half go to north to the metro. So another kind of a question for when you guys drive south to go to Salem from downtown, how do you get onto the freeway? And that's probably how those trucks are going to go too.
That's scary, because I go over Knight's Bridge. Now I'm worried. You don't want to get my opinion on that. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, yeah, and interestingly, territorial is a truck route, right? It's a designated
That's what I
truck
just
route.
found out, and that's been a point of contention in this.
But it is on the restricted list here.
Yes, and it has been published and approved. So, and for us, we go through the numbers. I don't want to get an approval that then I have my client that can't actually live with your approval. So that's why we do things like that. We send that information to them and make sure it works.
Okay. Any more questions?
I got a question. So I think this goes back to, what Chair Savory was trying to get at too. Obviously, traffic, huge concern for us, but first, I think, is one of the bigger concerns, simply because it's not a city road, it's a county road. We don't really, we've kind of confirmed that the county's not really doing much to that. Brian has asked for us to put another stipulation and add to that as a condition of approval, is that you do not go down the first road, that you do Walnut until there's improvements. Is your client, or are you considering in any way, shape, or form some additional improvement on First? With the potholes, I don't think your drivers are going to want to go that direction anyways, because I think they're going to have additional issues with their vehicles, but I think that's kind of where you're heading.
Yeah. Well, so I haven't specifically talked to him about this, so I don't know. One of the things we've done in other cities, we've done it in Hillsborough with the Nike facility, and it is where SDC fees can be directed, traffic SDC fees can be directed towards specific improvements. I don't know if the city of Canby has that mechanism in your code to be able to do that. We're improving Walnut, a half street on Walnut. Would there be a reason to direct those funds and that improvement and put it all onto First? Is that better? We have, we've assumed a certain set of, and it's some very large costs, but where those go could be changed. So that might be something to consider.
Ryan?
It's possible that, and I would think very likely, if this use gets approved, and knowing that the most direct route out to the highway is that other block in Southeast First, that the city would raise their priority in what streets to improve, and that, that's where that SDC money would end up going, is to where we think the highest priorities are. So if this use comes about, I would think, just as the signal light, before we even knew about this proposal, we were already moving as quick as we could to get a signal light at the Hazeldale and Sequoia Parkway, because we anticipated new uses coming and triggering the need for it. So we were doing what we could to get out in front of it, and then all of a sudden this use comes in, and that traffic study said, hey, this is the one that's going to cause it to fail. So luckily we had that started just as they came in, and hopefully we're going to have it operational before they are. So that's how our system works. What I don't know is the dollar figure that we have to divide over priority projects and how quickly we'll be able to get that road improved. So I'm worried about a year or two or so, I don't know. that they might be operating on that road, and it's going to deteriorate very quickly.
But there's not, we can't designate any funds for First Avenue because it's a county road, is that true, or?
No, the portion that we're talking about is actually a city road.
Oh, okay.
It's only the
Okay.
portion adjacent to their property that's a county road.
Okay.
So it's in our jurisdiction, it's a city road, it's going to be our system development charges, which they will contribute, that could be funneled towards this, but whether it is or not, that's not for you or I to determine. But it would be a natural inclination for it to rise in importance.
I'd like to maybe
go ahead,
add a little bit on that. What is the limitations of the city requiring off-site improvements? You had mentioned, the signal light, that, they're contributing a portion, which would be about 5%. Would this be similar proportion amount, about 5% to improve?
My advice would be that I believe that we could ask a proportional share of improvements to that road. Because I believe if we don't put some restriction on its use, that they're going to use it, and it's substandard. Our ordinances say that we really shouldn't approve development that doesn't have adequate infrastructure to serve it, and staff believes that's one segment of road that they're likely to use that isn't adequate. And the best way to handle that is to tell them, well, even though it's off-site, I think you need to contribute a proportional cost to its improvement if you're going to be using it. Now, if we restrict them from using it, then,
You can't have it both ways.
either you can't have it both ways, or it helps them get what they really want in the end, because they would like to probably use that route rather than Walnut, just because it's a little shorter. And they would probably, I'm quite sure, would prefer a more direct route directly to the highway, like Malino Road extension. And, we're working towards that too, because it's not only going to help them, but it's going to help for the eventual build out of our park. So, but, that's a potential $10 million extension. We've got it outlined out. So we're searching for those grants and such to be able to afford that.
You said it's only a tenth of a mile difference?
Yeah, the city manager actually drove both routes.
They'll have to turn on the Walnut, or is that where your driveways are going to be, on Walnut or First?
First.
Oh, okay. So
They just go a little bit out of the way to get to...
4 turns versus one.
Right.
Well, it'd be 3 turns, so.
Right. I mean, it's possible you can instruct them to use the Walnut so that we don't continue to deteriorate that section of the road for everyone else until it's improved.
According to DKS, they take a lot more.
Well, they can handle the vehicles, the volume, but that doesn't mean the road won't deteriorate if it's not built to proper standard.
Well, that is one of our conditions of approval, that last one you had me write up.
Right, if you were to add that, and, I already apologize that it didn't really dawn on us that hadn't fully considered that until just here recently. So they weren't aware of that.
Well, if it's approved, I'll add it, Brian.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, so.
Usually they don't deal with that stuff.
I want to see the new logo.
We don't have that.
Okay, so all public testimony is now closed, and I think we've asked all the questions that have popped into our fertile minds. So at this point, we'll have a discussion. Mr. Mills, would you care to lead us off with your thoughts on this?
I guess I'm going to just throw out a real quick thing. There's a few little technical things that were in the document, and I'll just talk with those to Brian about those afterwards. I don't think it's worth the commission's time on this. It's just a couple minor technical questions I had, but to me, the underlying question here is what conditions of approval do we need to consider, and what would the applicant be willing to entertain? What would he have to have in order to feel comfortable going forward? Because we've heard a lot about traffic as being the chief concern. I think that we recognize that there's a limitation about how much we can do and how quickly we can do it, and most especially around Southeast First. So I think that for me, when I look at the conditions of approval, that is perhaps not here yet, but we've talked about is there a condition of approval that we have to come up with to satisfy ourselves that we can move this ahead? And that condition of approval is probably something related to what are we going to do on Southeast First. Is that a good start?
Yep.
Okay.
There.
So yeah, I think it's a great add to Canby. I honestly, very rare do we get, just to kind of answer your question before, any tenants in our industrial that come anywhere close to add the employees that they're going to plan on adding. I mean, pretty much every one is a variance that we allow. And so I do think it's a good add. I think it's the right use for the space out there. I do have a concern on First, along with everybody else, and certainly have a concern from traffic. It's one of the biggest things that we deal with in any of the things that we approve or disapprove. So I am a proponent to it, but I do want the restriction in there to use Walnut until we can get some improvement on First.
I also can see this as a great opportunity for the city, but I do want to acknowledge something that, in addition to traffic that I heard repeatedly, either straight out said or nuanced, is that the feeling is that they'd like to see the city be more proactive instead of reactive to situations, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I did hear you when you said that.
Okay. Andre.
Yeah, I agree that this is a good add to the city of Canby. However, I think adding some restrictions to some of the local roads to where local, or I should say off-site truck traffic is not allowed is a good way to kind of control that. And I'm not certain whether it's better to restrict access along First Avenue or have them contribute a small portion and allow them to use it. I'm just not familiar enough with that road to say either way. But otherwise, I think we should add all of the conditions that Brian had proposed.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm tentatively in favor of it. I appreciated what Commissioner Mills and Morton said with respect to the conditions of approval on Southeast First. I think this is a economic, gain obviously for the city of Canby, and I think it would help local business as well. So I would be for it, so long as we have that condition of approval in place.
Mr. Boatright.
Yeah, the traffic's the only thing that concerns me, but that concerns us about every project that we do anymore because we're just growing fast. The 12 employees per acre, we waive that all the time. But actually, we wonder why it's even in there. But I think, well, I know we're going to have another access to 99E, and I don't, with this going in there and more business being put in the industrial center there, it's going to happen pretty soon. So the light's coming at Sequoia and Hazeldale, and I think Walnut might be easier with all the less turns going that way anyway. So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. I too am concerned about the traffic. It's a concern of mine, but like Mr. Boatright says, This has been a concern of this commission for quite some time, and not just on this project. I agree with the statement. I can't remember who made it. We go ahead and we approve projects, then discover that we don't have adequate infrastructure, then rush to build a road or put in a light. It's a matter of economics. Where do we get the money? Things like that. But I can't help but think that the economic benefits to the city of Canby for this project will help push us to get some of that those projects done. So I too am in favor of the project. So I will entertain a motion to approve. I'll entertain a motion to approve DR 18-10/CUP 18-07 Project Shakespeare.
Mr. Chair.
With the conditions.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve DR 18-10/CUP 18-07 with the conditions of approval recommended by staff. In addition, with a condition that requires trucks to take Walnut to Sequoia Parkway until a segment of Southeast First Avenue and Hazeldale Way is improved to adequately accept those trucks.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And there we go. Okay. Then we'll have, Brian, do we need a final decision on this evening?
We do have that prepared, right? It's on the agenda. Is it not in there? That is not in there. Laney says that it's not in our packet today, even though it's listed.
Okay.
I guess I didn't realize that.
Can we blame Laney for this as well? Perfect.
So if I could, the decision isn't absolutely final until the following Planning Commission meeting when they approve the written findings of their oral decision, just so you are aware of that.
And that begins the 10-day appeal period, or?
Yeah, it'll end a day or two after that when we mail out the decision. That's when the appeal period begins.
Okay, Brian, any items of interest from the staff?
I don't think so tonight.
So our next Planning Commission meeting is still scheduled for Monday, January 28th?
It has to be.
I mean, that certainly is our regular scheduled meeting. At this point, I don't believe we have any public hearings scheduled for that meeting at this time. So there is a possibility we may cancel that meeting because we don't have any text amendments in the work or anything at this point.
But we have to approve this final decision.
For this.
We could come back simply to do that, to keep it moving on our quickest possible
Okay, so let's do that.
route. Okay, that's what we'll do.
So any questions for staff? Any?
Is there the possibility of having some text amendments, or at least some
We can discuss.
things we can work
We can
on
have
during
a
that time?
work session and talk about them, but we have to notify DLCD of any text amendments we're doing, and we haven't done that yet, so we can't have a first evidentiary hearing or anything at this stage.
But we could have some type of
But we could talk
use
about.
of the time.
Yeah, we could talk
Okay.
about what we're currently thinking about.
Okay. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.